Chapter 502. Chu Xiu's words were arrogant to others. Who did he think he was to kill a martial Dao master just like that? However, it was the truth when it came to Chu Xiu, who had just killed a martial Dao master. No one would take Chu Xiu's words as a joke. Besides Chu Xiu, Halbert and Wu Shuang had already acknowledged Lu Fengxian as their master. Even Dong Qikuan felt a little pressured when he sensed Halbert's aura. Although Lu Fengxian was only at the 5 cheese collecting in origin stage, he had just obtained Marquis Lu Wenho's inheritance after all. Dong Qikuan was not sure if he could unleash the power of the 9 transformation divine weapon. However, Dong Qikuan had already said it. If he tried to step aside now, he would lose all his face. Therefore, Dong Qikuan directly said to Su Ting, "Brother Su, help me suppress these 2 junior martial artists. Haven't you always wanted to borrow my Dong family's divine sacrificial jade to strengthen your mental strength? If you help me today, I'll lend you the divine sacrificing jade for a year." Su Ting's eyes lit up when he heard that. He could not help but stand beside Dong Qikuan. The divine sacrificing jade was the Dong family's inherited treasure. Cultivating around it could strengthen one's mental strength. Even if one did not know any mental strength secret techniques, the divine sacrificing jade could still strengthen one's mental strength passively. However, the divine sacrificing jade was getting smaller and smaller. The divine sacrificing jade of the Dong family was the size of a fist, but it was only the size of a quail's egg now. Su Ting was weak in terms of mental strength. He had long wanted to borrow the divine sacrificing jade of the Dong family. However, even the people of the Dong family did not dare to use it recklessly, so why would they lend it to Su Ting? It was rare for Dong Qikuan to be generous, so Su Ting did not want to miss the opportunity. At the sight of this, everyone present shook their heads. Other than admitting defeat, Chu Xiu and LV Fengxian seemed to have no other way out of this. Chu Xiu had a record of killing a martial Dao grandmaster, and Lu Fengxian also had a divine weapon. However, they were facing 3 martial Dao grandmasters. It was impossible for them to defeat them. But at that moment, Xie Xiaolu suddenly stood out and said, "My master thinks highly of Brother Lu. You refuse to give face to the Guanzhong torture room and Sword King City. Are you going to refuse to give face to my master?" Dong Qikuan and the others frowned. To be honest, the World Alliance's strength was definitely inferior to Sword King City's. Although the Sword King City was stronger than Sword King City's strength, the Chenqing Di Tian was. Xie Tian could ask Feng Qi Shao to stop meddling, but he did not dare to say anything to Di Chen Tian to alone. However, with the 9 revolutions cultivation method in front of him, a disciple of Chenqing Di would not be able to scare Dong Qikuan away. Looking at Xie Xiaolu, Dong Qikuan smiled and said, "Young Master Xie, although you're Alliance Head Chen's disciple, you still need to be reasonable. I'll give face to Alliance Head Chen, and I wouldn't dare to go against him. However, this kind of matter also depends on what face is involved. Today, you said that Lu Fengxian was favored by Alliance Master Chen, and my Dong clan gave you face. Tomorrow, you said that Zhang Fengxian was favored by Alliance Master Chen, and I had to give you face again. Even though Alliance Leader Chen was powerful, it wasn't to such an extent. How could he not allow others to touch someone he had his eyes on? There's no such tyrannical thing in this world. It's against the rules." Dong Qikuan's words caused the surrounding people to look at him with disdain. They hadn't realized before that Dong Qikuan, the head of the Dong family, was actually so shameless. It must be known that Dong Qikuan's current actions were incomparably tyrannical. What he was doing was breaking the rules, and now he was saying that others had broken the rules. Xie Xiaolu was immediately angered by Dong Qikuan's words to the point that his face turned red. He wasn't good with words, so he didn't know how to refute Dong Qikuan. However, at this moment, a thunderous and deafening voice suddenly resounded. "Dong Qikuan, were you the one who said that you weren't going to give me face? Who gave you the guts to say such words in front of my disciple?" As that voice rang out, a rumbling sound came from afar. Everyone looked up, only to see the trees in the distance being torn apart and falling to the ground. A black shadow quickly rushed over, like a black lightning, and in the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of Xie Xiaolu. It was actually a black tiger that was almost as tall as a person, and it was incomparably elegant. The black tiger squatted in front of Xie Xiaolu and reservedly stretched out its paw to pat Xie Xiaolu's back, as if it was comforting him. After seeing the black tiger, Xiao Lu's eyes immediately revealed a hint of joy. When they saw the black tiger, everyone's expression changed. In a place like West Chu, there were actually quite a few black tigers in the wilderness. However, there was only one that had this kind of terrifying speed and was so close to Xiao Lu. That was the black tiger that the World Alliance's alliance master, Chen Qingdi, was raising. Sure enough, everyone looked in the direction that the black tiger came from and saw a figure slowly walking over. With a single step, it crossed a distance of several dozen feet. It was a middle-aged man dressed in black. The tight-fitting black robe wrapped around his burly body, revealing his arms. On his forearms, there was even a pair of gauntlets. On the gauntlets were dazzling golden dragon tattoos, constantly twisting in the sunlight. From the looks of it, it was not an ordinary item. On his waist, there was also a belt with the same golden dragon tattoos. From the looks of it, it was an existence that came from the same source as the gauntlets. A scarlet cloak fluttered behind him. It didn't look evil, but rather boundless domineering. That aura even made it hard for everyone present to breathe. The World Alliance's Chen Qingdi. The Chen Qingdi who used a pair of iron fists to conquer 1,000 miles of land. When everyone present saw Chen Qingdi, no one paid attention to Chen Qingdi's appearance. They could only feel the extreme aura coming from Chen Qingdi's body. Xiao Lu was also stunned when he saw Chen Qingdi. He muttered, "Master, why are you here?" This time's mountain opening ceremony was because Chen Qingdi was too lazy to come here, so he sent Xiao Lu. But why did Chen Qingdi personally come here? Chen Qingdi lightly said, "Did you use the 100 by blade I gave you? I've left an imprint on it. As long as you use it, I'll be able to sense it. I have nurtured you for so long. Wouldn't it be a pity if you were killed by something in the outside world?" Hearing Chen Qingdi's words, Xiao Lu suddenly understood. He had used some of the life-saving treasures given to him by Chen Qingdi in the big burial mound. He didn't expect that there would be Chen Qingdi's mark on them. Although his master's words were very awkward, he was very protective of him. Xiao Lu was used to it, so he naturally turned Chen Qingdi's words into concern. Dong Qikuan and the Dong family's old ancestor looked at each other. They didn't expect that Chen Qingdi would come this time. Although they kept saying that even if it was Chen Qingdi, he had to follow the rules, but now that Chen Qingdi was standing in front of them, they couldn't say a word. Just when Dong Qikuan wanted to say something, Chen Qingdi suddenly turned around and looked at him. He placed his left hand on the black tiger's head and gently stroked it. The handsome black tiger squinted its eyes like a kitten, enjoying Chen Qingdi's stroking. Being stared at by Chen Qingdi, Dong Qikuan instantly felt a powerful aura like Mount Tai pressing down on him. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. Dong Qikuan swallowed his saliva and said, "Chen." Before he could say anything, Chen Qingdi directly waved his hand and said coldly, "Just now, you said that you didn't want to give me face? You said that I didn't follow the rules? You said that I was overbearing?" Dong Qikuan hurriedly said, "Alliance leader Chen, listen to me." Before he finished speaking, Chen Qingdi directly took a step forward. The ground under his feet suddenly cracked inch by inch, and the area within a radius of hundreds of feet was like an earthquake. With a punch, the whole world seemed to stand still in an instant, like a picture scroll. However, in the next moment, everything under that punch was shattered. God slaying God, fist shattering mountains and rivers. Dong Qikuan's expression suddenly changed, and countless sword lights rose from the long sword in his hand. Before he could fully display his sword force, everything was smashed by Chen Qingdi's punch. Gang Qi exploded, and the weapons were shattered. Dong Qikuan was directly sent flying by Chen Qingdi's punch for dozens of feet, and crashed into more than 10 giant trees in succession before he came to a stop. A large amount of blood gushed out, and he was immediately seriously injured. After withdrawing his punch, Chen Qingdi said coldly, "There's one thing you're right about, I am that overbearing. How dare a piece of trash like you say that you don't give me face? Why do I, Chen Qingdi, need you to give me face? What face do you deserve to give me?" This punch shocked everyone present. No one had expected that Dong Qikuan, who was also in the real pellet state and a martial Dao grandmaster, would be so vulnerable in the hands of Chen Qingdi. At this time, the patriarch of the Dong family seemed to have come to his senses. Looking at Dong Qikuan, who was seriously injured and vomiting blood, the patriarch of the Dong family shouted angrily, "Chen Qingdi! This is the Dong family you. Chen Qingdi glanced at the patriarch of the Dong family. His figure moved, and some of the weaker people couldn't even see Chen Qingdi's figure. However, in the next moment, Chen Qingdi had already appeared in front of the patriarch of the Dong family. In horror, the patriarch of the Dong family directly formed a seal with his hands. After all, he was a martial Dao grandmaster of the older generation, and he still had some trump cards. Boundless dazzling starlight condensed, and each spot of starlight condensed into a formation, trying to stop Chen Qingdi. However, Chen Qingdi directly slapped down. In an instant, the gang qi exploded, and the starlight was shattered. Chen Qingdi's right hand squeezed the patriarch of the Dong family's neck. The dragon pattern on the golden arm armor twisted like a formation pattern, directly sealing the genuine qi of the patriarch of the Dong family's whole body. At this time, he was like an ordinary person, held up by the neck by Chen Qingdi, and stretched his legs helplessly. Staring at the patriarch of the Dong family, Chen Qingdi said in a calm and cold voice, "Old thing, what do you want to say? This is your Dong family, so what? Among the 9 major families, there is still the Wang family and the Li family. Believe it or not, I can make this place no longer belong to the Dong family tomorrow." Chapter 503. He seriously injured Dong Qikuan with one punch and subdued the patriarch of the Dong family with one move. Chen Qingdi's strength was beyond everyone's imagination. For most of the martial artists present, a martial Dao grandmaster was already an unreachable existence. But what about Chen Qingdi? The 2 martial Dao grandmasters were like children that could not withstand a single blow. Su Tingyi stood motionless. He was not calm, but he did not dare to move. Although he had just promised Dong Qikuan that he would stand on their side, under Emperor Chen Qingdi's powerful aura, Su Tingyi was so scared that he didn't even dare to fart. Chu Xiu looked at Chen Qingdi. He had a hunch that although Chen Qingdi was still in the real pellet realm, he was not far from the true fire realm. He might even have half a foot in this realm. In the past, in the alliance of Demon Dao, Wuxia defeated Mountain Ghost of the Moon worshipping cult with one move. Although Chen Qingdi had not reached Wuxia's realm, the strength of the 2 patriarchs of the Dong family was not as strong as Mountain Ghost of the Moon worshipping cult's 9 great divine magispriests. At this time, the silence was terrible. When Chen Qingdi attacked, he looked down at everyone. His domineering aura could not be described with words. Dong Qikuan, who was seriously injured and vomited blood, did not dare to say another word. The patriarch of the Dong family, who was carried in the air by Chen Qingdi like a dog, also did not dare to say another word. Seeing the look in Chen Qingdi's eyes, the patriarch of the Dong family knew that Chen Qingdi was not threatening him. He would do what he said. Although the Dong family and the World Alliance were both in West Chu, the Dong family rarely dealt with the World Alliance. One of them was one of the 9 great clans that had existed for a long time, while the other was an uncultivated force that had risen to power not long ago. The Dong clan had always maintained a respectful attitude towards the World Alliance and didn't want to provoke them. In the past, the Dong family had thought that even though Chen Qingdi was overbearing, he still had to abide by the rules of the Zhonghu. But after seeing him today, they realized that Chen Qingdi wasn't overbearing at all. He was simply temperamental, and he acted like a madman without any scruples to the extreme. He had never considered whether the other 9 aristocratic families would come to him for an explanation if he really massacred the Dong family, whether the World Alliance would be damaged because of this, and how the West Chu martial arts world would view the World Alliance. It seemed that in Chen Qingdi's eyes, there was only one result, and that was, those who obeyed him would prosper, and those who defied him would die. Sensing Chen Qingdi's intention, the patriarch of the Dong family smiled bitterly and said, "Alliance leader Chen, my Dong family was rash in this matter. It's my Dong family's fault. I hope Alliance leader Chen can be magnanimous and let my Dong family off this time." As soon as he said this, everyone present was instantly dumbfounded. The faces of the Dong family's martial artists were flushed with shame and indignation, and they wished they could find a hole to hide in. Who didn't want to lose face in the Zhonghu? But now, the patriarch of the Dong family's words could be said to be extremely soft. It was as if he had thrown his face to the ground and taken the initiative to trample on it. If this matter was spread out, the Dong family would become a laughingstock from now on. Compared with the Dong family, which had existed for thousands of years, the World Alliance had existed for less than 100 years. Compared with the patriarch of the Dong family, although Chen Qingdi was powerful, His seniority was much lower than the patriarch of the Dong family. He and Dong Chikuan were of the same generation. But now, the patriarch of the Dong family had admitted defeat to Chen Qingdi in an almost pleading tone. This was a great loss of face. In fact, only the patriarch of the Dong family knew that compared to his life, face was nothing. This time, the Dong family did not admit defeat. In the future, the Dong family's territory would really have to change its surname. With a cold laugh, Emperor Chen Qingdi waved his hand and tossed the patriarch of the Dong clan aside. Then he said coolly, "Remember, think before you speak next time. You should know who I am and what kind of person I am. I don't need you to give me face, and you're not qualified to give me face." The two martial Dao grandmasters of the Dong family did not dare to say a word. Su Tingyi even lowered his head, hoping that Chen Qingdi did not see him. However, at this moment, Chen Qingdi also turned his eyes to him and said indifferently, "Are you also on the Dong family's side?" Su Tingyi hurriedly said, "Alliance leader Chen, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not from the Dong family. It's just that I'm in the Dong family now, and I have no choice. I also hate the Dong family for bullying the weak." Chen Qingdi sneered, but he did not expose Su Tingyi. He just sneered and said, "Idiot! Do you think I'm unhappy with the Dong family bullying the weak? The point is not that the Dong family is bullying the weak, but whose juniors he bullied. Get lost, and be more careful next time." Hearing Chen Qingdi's words, Su Tingyi felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, and he immediately scrammed. At this moment, Chen Qingdi finally turned his eyes to Chu Xiao and the others. Looking at Lu Fengxian, Chen Qingdi said with a smile, "Kid, what did I say before? If you were willing to join the World Alliance and worship me as your master, how would the Dong family dare to snatch the opportunity from you? In the Jianghu, strength is very important, comprehension is very important, and luck is very important. However, a backer is also very important. How is it? Do you regret it now?" Lu Fengxian shook his head and said, "Thank you for your help, Senior Chen. However, I'm used to wandering around, and I have a master now. I can only thank Senior Chen for your kindness." Chen Qingdi also shook his head. If Lu Fengxian changed his mind and wanted to join the World Alliance, then he wouldn't be Lu Fengxian. Similarly, Chen Qingdi wouldn't appreciate him so much. At this time, Chen Qingdi turned his eyes to Chu Xiao. Chu Xiao only cupped his hands at Chen Qingdi and said, "Greetings, Senior Chen." Chen Qingdi nodded and sized up Chu Xiao. He raised his eyebrows and said, "You're Chu Xiao? I've always heard Xie Xiao Lu mention you. I heard that you killed a grandmaster this time? Although that guy is a bit useless, he's still a martial Dao grandmaster. You're not bad, very good." Xie Xiao Lu looked at Chen Qingdi in surprise. Others might not know, but he knew Chen Qingdi's character. There weren't many people in the Jianghu who could make Chen Qingdi say, "Not bad," twice in a row. Lu Fengxian was the same. Since Chen Qingdi said that Chu Xiao was not bad, then he was really not bad. At this time, Chen Qingdi looked at Feng Qixiao and said with a strange gaze, "You're also a good swordsman. There aren't many people in Sword King City who are pleasing to the eye, but you're one of the few who aren't. I just don't know if Sword King City will regret choosing you as its successor in the future." Feng Qixiao's eyes widened as he touched his chin. Was Chen Qingdi praising him or praising him? Why did he feel that something was wrong? However, Feng Qixiao didn't think too much about it. In any case, Chen Qingdi said that he was not bad. Being recognized by such a fierce person, even Feng Qixiao felt a bit excited. Chen Qingdi waved his hand and said, "Come with me. We'll go to the World Alliance to recuperate for a while. Don't worry, not to mention the inheritance of demon god Lu Wenho, even if you have the inheritance of the Kunlun devil cult, no one would dare to come to my World Alliance to exterminate demons." After saying that, Chen Qingdi was about to leave. The Dong family's disciples made way for him, their eyes filled with awe. Just as Chu Xiao passed by the Dong family's disciples, Chu Xiao suddenly said, "Senior Chen, you've offended the Dong family this time. You've trampled on their dignity. However, I'm afraid that some people won't accept it, and they'll cause trouble for you again in the future. It's better to cut the weeds and get rid of the roots." As soon as these words were spoken, the members of the Dong clan were instantly stunned on the spot. The Dong clan's ancestor and Dong Chikuan cursed Chu Xiao in their hearts in unison. This bastard is simply malicious to the extreme. He's clearly provoking Emperor Chen Qing to eradicate the Dong clan. Chen Qingdi looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Then he laughed and said, "Boy, you're really vicious. You're even more ruthless than me. However, it doesn't matter. I've cut the weeds and got rid of the roots before. However, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll let them go this time. If they don't know what's good for them, I don't mind changing the name of this place." Hearing this, the patriarch of the Dong family and Dong Chikuan both heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Emperor Chen Qingdi acted according to his mood. If he was a little more rational and ruthless, he might really have slaughtered the entire Dong family. After Chen Qingdi left, the patriarch of the Dong family and Dong Chikuan exchanged a glance. Their eyes were filled with bitterness. Now that Chen Qingdi had left, would they dare to take revenge on him? Would they dare to look for trouble with the Heaven Alliance? Just now, Chen Qingdi had left a great shadow in their hearts. He was like a demon god, and he was so powerful that they couldn't bring themselves to take revenge on him. After leaving the dense forest, Chen Qingdi said to Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian, "You two kids, go back to the Heaven Alliance with me. I've said that as long as you're in the Heaven Alliance, even if you get the inheritance of the Kunlun Devil cult, no one will dare to take revenge on you." Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian exchanged a glance. Chu Xiu stepped forward, cupped his hands, and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Alliance Leader Chen. However, I'm going back to the Guanzhong torture room with Brother Lu. Guanzhong is located between the three countries, and there aren't many forces around. Moreover, I believe that with the strength of the Guanzhong torture room, no one will dare to take revenge on us." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Chen Qingdi didn't insist. He just nodded and said, "You can go back to the Guanzhong torture room. Guan Siyu isn't a weakling. Most importantly, the Guanzhong torture room has the shadow of Chu Juxia. If other forces want to rob the Guanzhong torture room, they will have to think twice." With that said, Chen Qingdi turned his gaze to Lu Fengxian and said in a deep voice, "Little girl, are you really not considering taking me as your master and joining the Heaven Alliance? In this Jianghu, having a backer and not having one are two different things. Look at that little boy named Chu. His thoughts are deeper than yours, and he is stronger than you, but he still joined the Guanzhong torture hall and found a good backer." Lu Fengxian shook her head with a bitter smile and said, "Senior Chen, I'm a little embarrassed by your repeated invitations, but I really don't want to be here." Hearing Lu Fengxian say this, Chen Qingdi didn't insist. After Xie Xiaolu bid farewell to Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu, the two groups left. Chapter 504. After Lu Fengxian and Chu Xiu left, they prepared to return to the Guanzhong torture room. The news of LV Wunho's inheritance had not spread out yet, so as long as they rushed back to the Guanzhong torture room in time, they would not have to worry about anyone coveting the inheritance. In fact, the best way for Lu Fengxian now was to join a top-notch force like the World Alliance and find a backer to protect her. LV Wunho's inheritance was indeed tempting, but people like Chen Qingdi had their own martial Dao, so they would not be interested in LV Wunho's inheritance, even if it was a 9-transformation inheritance. It was a pity that LV Fengxian looked like a person who was easy to talk to, but she was extremely stubborn. Not to mention Chu Xiu, no one could persuade her. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the forest, and 4 Xiantian realm martial artists rushed over. After seeing Lu Fengxian, the 4 of them knelt on one knee, lowered their heads, and said in a deep voice, "We greet the Lord." Lu Fengxian was dumbfounded, and he asked doubtfully, "Who are you?" Hearing their tone, Chu Xiu suddenly reacted. Why did they sound like Shui Wuxiang and the others when they spoke in such a tone? Chu Xiu asked in a deep voice, "You are Shui Wuxiang and the others?" Among the 4, a tall and thin man with a blue face smiled bitterly. "Yes, we are." At this time, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian suddenly remembered that these people were indeed not dead. At that time, Lu Fengxian had just fused with LV Wunho's true soul, and Shui Wuxiang and the others were already at the end of their lives, so they could only randomly choose 4 people to possess. As there were too many people at that time, Chu Xiu and the others did not pay attention to the targets they were possessing. Lu Fengxian asked curiously, "Why are you calling me Lord now? I'm not Marquis Lu Wunho, and it's because of me that Marquis Lu Wunho's true spirit shattered. You should be looking for me for revenge." Shui Wuxiang bitterly smiled. "This is fate. Maybe in this era, Lord Wenho no longer has the possibility of revival. Not only that, Lord Wenho is 80% similar to Lord Wenho when he was young. You have even inherited all of Lord Wenho's cultivation arts, and even the divine weapon Unparalleled is willing to recognize you as its master. It can be said that you are the current Lord Wenho. If we don't recognize you as our master, who else can we recognize? Lu Fengxian frowned and wanted to refuse. He was used to being alone, so he didn't want to accept any servants at this time. However, at this time, Chu Xiu transmitted his voice to Lu Fengxian. Brother Lu, take these 4 people. You won't lose out. Among the 4 of them, Shui Wuxiang was the most proficient in scheming formations. Although his combat power wasn't strong, he was extremely strange. Yan Qishao and Shi Jiuling were battle generals, and their strengths weren't weak. Xian Jiuyo didn't know what he was good at, but since he was able to follow Marquis Lu Wenho in that era, he obviously wasn't a weakling. Don't underestimate them just because they are only in the Xiantian realm after the possession. They were once existences that surpassed the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. Although their strength is gone, they still have the experience. Now that they have cultivated again, it won't be difficult. If you take these 4 people, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Lu Fengxian was quite convinced by Chu Xiu's vision. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Lu Fengxian nodded and said, "Since it's like this, you can follow me. But first, you have to change your tone. It's uncomfortable to listen to it. Since you've already possessed, I believe you should understand some things about the current era, right?" Shui Wuxiang and the others nodded and said, We know." Lu Fengxian nodded and suddenly asked, "By the way, do you know how to make things like cultivation jade strips?" Shui Wuxiang said proudly, "Subordinates' cultivation in the Tao of arrays is not inferior to those array masters of the Tao Gate. Of course I know how to make something as simple as cultivation jade strips, but I don't have the materials at the moment, so I can't make it. May I ask, Lord, do you want to keep it for a long time or for temporary use? If it's for temporary use, subordinate can make one now." Lu Fengxian said, "For temporary use." Shui Wuxiang nodded. He directly plucked a few wild fruits from the roadside, squeezed out the water, and condensed it with his true qi. Then, he outlined a few array patterns on it, and it actually turned into something that looked like a soft candy. "Lord, this thing can only be used once. As long as the cultivation technique inside is read by someone, or after 3 days, this thing will dissipate." Shui Wuxiang's face was a little pale. Right now, he was only in the Xiantian realm. Even making such a small thing had consumed a lot of his true qi. Lu Fengxian took it and infused the 9 Heavens Fiend golden body cultivation technique into it. Then she passed it to Chu Xiu and said, "Brother Chu, it was you who brought me here this time. If not for you, I wouldn't have had any fate with Marquis Lu Wenho's inheritance. This is Marquis Lu Wenho's body tempering cultivation technique. 9 Heavens Fiend golden body. Keep it. When Shui Wuxiang's true qi recovers, I'll get him to make another cultivation jade strip and pass it to you." Hearing this, Shui Wuxiang hurriedly stopped her and said, "Lord, you can't. This is a legacy cultivation technique left behind by Lord Marquis Lu Wenho. How can it be given out so casually?" Lu Fengxian did not get angry. Instead, he said with an indifferent expression, "Are you the Lord or am I the Lord?" Shui Wuxiang smiled bitterly and did not continue to stop Lu Fengxian. He also discovered that although this Lu Fengxian's overall personality was different from Lord Marquis Lu Fengxian's, there were some details that were very similar to Lord Marquis Lu Fengxian's personality. As long as Lord Marquis Lu Wenho decided on something, no one could stop him. Now, Lu Fengxian was the same. As long as he decided on something, no one could stop him. Such a personality could be said to be extremely decisive. However, no one knew whether it was good or bad. After all, in ancient times, if Marquis Lu Wenho had listened to Shui Wuxiang's advice and temporarily kept a low profile, he would not have fallen into such a situation. Chu Xiu also did not stand on ceremony with Lu Fengxian. He took the cultivation technique imparting item and said, "Many thanks, Brother Lu. I also happen to be in need of a top-notch body tempering cultivation technique. I won't stand on ceremony with you. However, I don't need the demon god's unparalleled halberd. I am a saber user. Changing to halberd would take too much time." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Lu Fengxian did not force the cultivation technique to Chu Xiu. The two of them brought Shui Wuxiang and the others back to the Guanzhong torture room. Inside the Guanxi torture chamber headquarters, hearing the news of Chu Xiu's return, the Ghost Hand Monarch specially brought people out to welcome him. Chu Xiu had not even entered the door when the Ghost Hand Monarch was already laughing and cupping his fists. Congratulations to Lord for beheading a Grandmaster and entering the 4th place on the Dragon and Tiger list. Chu Xiu asked in surprise. This matter has already spread out? The Ghost Hand Monarch nodded and said, It has been spread out for a long time. Lord, your reputation in the underworld is now becoming more and more resounding. Along the way, Chu Xiu was afraid of any accidents, so he had been rushing with Lu Fengxian at full speed, but he did not care about the news outside. The wind-sweeping buildings' actions were quite fast. The Ghost Hand Monarch cupped his fists at Lu Fengxian and said, I heard that young Marquis Wen has obtained the inheritance of the ancient demon god Marquis Lu Wenho. This is also a cause for celebration. Lu Fengxian also greeted the Ghost Hand Monarch politely. All right, let's go in and talk. Chu Xiu then asked the Ghost Hand King about what had happened during this period of time after inviting the crowd into the hall. The series of events that happened after Marquis Lu Wenho's land of inheritance had spread throughout the underworld in a few days, and it was quite well known. Among them, the most outstanding one was Chu Xiu, who killed a Grandmaster. After becoming the little celestial master Zhang Qingzhen, he was another young martial artist who killed a martial Dao Grandmaster in public. Therefore, Chu Xiu was also promoted to the 4th place on the Longhu list. The previous 4th place was an extremely mysterious guy, soul-snatching Saber Li Filian. The number of times this person had attacked in the underworld could be counted on one hand. He attacked 11 times and killed 10 people. The only time he used 2 sabers to kill was a genius of the younger generation of Chunyang Dao sect. In the end, the younger generation of Chunyang Dao sect suffered a huge blow and was unable to recover. Although the title given to him by the people of the underworld was a little cliché, it really fit the image. When Li Filian attacked, his saber would seize souls and blood. There had never been a survivor, no matter who the opponent was or what the opponent's identity was. Because of the death of their disciple, Chunyang Dao sect had been hunting him for a long time, but to no avail. However, it was unknown whether it was because of the Chunyang Dao sect's pursuit, but Li Filian had not appeared in the underworld for the past 2 or 3 years, and there was no news of his achievements. Therefore, he could only give up his position to Chu Xiu. Moreover, this time, Li Filian not only gave up his position to Chu Xiu, but he also gave up his position to Ying Bailu. He directly fell to the 6th place, and Ying Bailu returned to the 5th place on the Longhu list. In the Big Tomb, Ying Bailu fought Chu Xiu with all his strength, and they were evenly matched. With the strength that Ying Bailu showed, he was ranked behind Chu Xiu. The only thing he lacked was an amazing achievement like Chu Xiu. As for Lu Fengxian, his ranking still did not change. The reason was very simple. Although Lu Fengxian had obtained the inheritance, he did not have any achievements. The reputation list looked at reputation and achievements, and both were indispensable. However, everyone also believed that after obtaining Wenho's inheritance, Lu Fengxian's strength would definitely skyrocket, and it was only a matter of time before his ranking rose. This was just a change among the younger generation, so Chu Xiu did not care too much about it. In fact, at Chu Xiu's position, he really did not care about the Longhu list. It was not only Chu Xiu, but it should be said that the top 5 existences on the Longhu list like Ying Bailu and the others, did not care about the rankings on the list. Their own strength was there for everyone to see, so who was strong and who was weak, didn't they have a point in their hearts? Things like the Longhu list were just for fun. On the contrary, the martial artists at the bottom were fighting for a position in the rankings every day, and it was very lively. Apart from the changes on the Longhu list, the one who had really become famous this time was Chen Qingdi, and the one who was out of luck was the Dong family. Chen Qingdi had not made a move for a period of time. The people of the Jianghu were forgetful, and some people had even forgotten about Chen Qingdi's former fame. As a result, when Chen Qingdi made a move this time, the whole Jianghu knew about it, and people could not help but sigh. Chen Qingdi was still the same Chen Qingdi. Chapter 505. Chen Qingdi was as domineering as ever. Some people even suspected that Chen Qingdi was not far from the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. At the level of a martial Dao Grandmaster, every improvement in cultivation was as difficult as ascending to the heavens, let alone taking another step forward. Chen Qingdi was born in the wilderness. If he could step into the true fire spiritual cultivation realm, the Tianxia alliance would be really powerful. However, compared with the domineering Chen Qingdi, the Dong family's reputation was ruined this time, and they played the role of a clown. Originally, the Dong family had disregarded the rules of the opening ceremony and robbed the opportunities of the younger generation martial artists, which was already very disreputable. As a result, the two Wu Dao grandmasters of the Dong family were humiliated by Chen Qingdi on the spot, which was a miserable scene. This time, it could be said that the Dong family's reputation was ruined. They were destined to become the laughingstock of Jianghu for several years, and even the disciples of the Dong family would not be able to raise their heads in Jianghu in the future. They had seen Wu Dao grandmasters who were unafraid of death, but it was really rare to see someone like the patriarch of the Dong family begging for mercy in Jianghu. After learning about the situation, Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian went to do closed-door training first. However, Lu Fengxian was in closed-door training to break through to the oneness of heaven and man, while Chu Xiu was recovering his primordial qi first. On the way, Chu Xiu only cared about hurrying and did not even have a rest. However, at this time, the Ghost Hand King said with some hesitation, "My lord, there's something I have to tell you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "What's the matter? Are those martial arts forces in Guanxi starting to make trouble again?" There was no lack of fools in Jianghu who were blinded by greed. Logically speaking, with the current strength and status of Chu Xiu in Jianghu, the Guanxi area should be very quiet. However, there were people who were blinded by a little profit, so if this kind of thing happened, Chu Xiu would not be surprised at all. The Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "It's not those martial arts forces in Guanxi, but people from the Guannan branch." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Yin Buotong's men? What did they do?" Among the 4 branches of the Guanzhong torture room, Guanbei torture officer Chu Simo was on his side because his godson, Chu Xiaoda, had joined the 9-branch hall. Xiao Yi, the Guangdong penal officer, was the strongest, but he had always maintained a neutral position and did not help either side. Only this Yin Batong made things difficult for Chu Xiu. In fact, Yin Batong couldn't get over it. Chu Xiu had crippled his disciple and killed one of his disciples, but Yin Batong was a cold-hearted person. In all fairness, he didn't spend much effort on his 2 disciples. Moreover, Yin Batong had fought with Wei Zhouduan his entire life. Now that Chu Xiu had helped him get rid of Wei Zhouduan, Yin Batong should be thanking Chu Xiu. In the end, Yin Batong always thought of the grudge, so he naturally found Chu Xiu to be an eyesore. The Ghost Hand King said, "Your Excellency, you've been gone for a long time this time. The Guanxi region has been without a ruler for a long time, so some constables from the Guannan region have come to investigate smuggling. They often cross the border to investigate some forces at the border of the Guanxi region and the Guannan region. Even if those forces are in the Guanxi region, they still investigate them. They even blackmail those forces, causing the martial arts forces at the border of the Guanxi region and the Guannan region to suffer greatly. They have complained to me many times. Therefore, it's not good for me to continue accepting gifts from those forces. This matter has also caused the reputation of our Guanxi branch at the border to fall." Chu Xiu said with a gloomy face, "The Guannan people came to our Guanxi area to investigate smuggling. They are the ones who crossed the border and broke the rules. Are you just going to stand by and let them be arrogant?" Ghost Hand King smiled bitterly. "My lord, we don't have a choice. Those people in Guannan said that the clue came from Guannan and spread all the way to Guanxi. We can take over, but we need my lord's warrant, because they also came with Yin Buotong's warrant. Therefore, when Sir is not here, we can't be tough with the Guannan people." Yen Bugue wanted to take action, but I stopped him. "It's not that I don't want to be tough, but when Sir is not here, once we take action, it will be hard to explain. Even if we are in the right, it will become unreasonable. I even suspect that the Guannan people are so arrogant that they are forcing us to take action. So I have been waiting for Sir to come back to deal with this matter." Chu Xiu nodded when he heard this. He patted the Ghostly Hand King's shoulder and said, "I misunderstood you. You are experienced and prudent. What you did was right. That fellow Yin Batong is most likely planning this. Yin Batong has been in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years and is very familiar with the rules of Guanzhong torture room. He should know that crossing the border is against the rules, but he still did it. Obviously, he is taking advantage of Chu Xiu's absence and no one in the entire Guanxi area can talk to him on equal terms. The Ghost Hand King asked, "Sir, what should we do now?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "I will go into seclusion for a while. Keep a close eye on the border between Guanxi and Guannan. If Yin Buotong's people come here again, tell me." After giving the Ghost Hand King his orders, Chu Xiu went into seclusion. While recovering Yuan Qi, Chu Xiu also tried to practice the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body. In the original plot, LV Fengxian was the only one who cultivated this cultivation method. In addition, with LV Fengxian's personality, he would naturally not share these things about the cultivation method with others. Therefore, in the original plot, the description of this cultivation method was very vague. At this time, Chu Xiu let out a long breath after reading the cultivation method. Sure enough, although this cultivation method is very strong, it has a strong aura of Lu Wenhou, and its nature is very rough. The meaning of the Nine Heavens is the Nine Heavens, and the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body also has 9 realms. Every realm required one to follow the instructions of the cultivation method. One had to cleanse the body with powerful demonic energy, and forcefully temper the body with demonic energy. Not to mention the pain involved, if one's physical body was weaker, they would directly cripple themselves while tempering their body with demonic energy. The higher the level of the cultivation method, the better it is. Although some cultivation methods have high levels, not everyone is qualified to practice them. For example, Chu Xiu's Avici 3 blades. If an ordinary person uses it, he will become a madman. Only people like Chu Xiu, who have a strong mind and a Buddhist treasure, glazed golden silk goo, dare to use it casually. The Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body is the same. The requirements for the cultivator are too high. Even if the Dong family obtains the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body, there are only a few people in the Dong family who are qualified to practice this cultivation method. Although a martial arts grandmaster like Dong Qikuan can forcibly practice several realms with his cultivation, he can only practice 3 realms at most, and his body will not be able to bear this kind of power. Lu Fengxian was born with divine strength, so there will be no obstacles for her to practice the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body. Chu Xiu has the great Vajra divine strength as a foundation, and his body is not weak, so he is naturally qualified. Moreover, although the Nine Heavens Fiend Golden Body is simple and violent, and the cultivation conditions are rough, its power is unusually strong. Each step is a heaven, and each realm will greatly increase the strength of the body, and there is also demonic energy to protect the body. When the cultivation reaches the 9th realm, it will reach the level of the immortal demon body, and it is common for the cultivator to regrow broken limbs. For example, if the cultivator cultivates to the realm of LV Wenhou, he is simply an existence that cannot be killed, and even the Tao and Buddhist sects have to work together to suppress his body. At present, Chu Xiu possessed both the Buddhist and demon sects' body tempering techniques. Who knew what would happen if he were to cultivate both at the same time? Inextinguishable golden body and inextinguishable demon body? However, Chu Xiu does not care about it. He cultivates Tao, Buddhist, and demon sects at the same time, so he is not worried about the cultivation method backfiring. Just after Chu Xiu has been in seclusion for a few days, the Ghost Hand King came to knock on the door of Chu Xiu's seclusion room, and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, those people in Guannan have crossed the boundary again." A trace of coldness flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes and he said, "Take me there." At this time, at the border between Guanxi and Guannan, in front of the Lu family's mansion, the Lu family master Lu Chengqian was speaking in a low voice to several Zhonghu constables from the Guanzhong torture room. The Lu family is only a small family in Guanxi, and the Lu family master, Lu Chengqian, is only in the inner gang realm. The Zhonghu constable said lightly, "Lu family master, we are investigating people smuggling contraband into West Chu, and the source is your Lu family. Does the Lu family master want to explain this matter?" Of course, it is fine if the Lu family master doesn't want to explain, but us brothers came all the way from Guannan, and after spending so much effort, we can't go back empty-handed, right? Why don't the Lu family master say something and we can drop this matter for now? Lu Chengqian said with a forced smile, "How much do you want?" In fact, Lu Chengqian was already used to this kind of thing, because it was not the first time. The Guannan region's Zhonghu constables had been extorting the small aristocratic families of the border area for a period of time. This was already the 3rd time for the Lu clan. Now, all the powers of the border area could be said to be filled with complaints. At the same time, they were cursing Chu Xiao in their hearts. They were all under the jurisdiction of Guanxi, and according to Chu Xiao's request, they had to give him a lot of offerings every month. Now they were being bullied, and Chu Xiao didn't even dare to fart, so how could they look up to him? In this border, many forces thought that Chu Xiao was tyrannical. He could be ruthless to the forces of Guanxi, but when facing outsiders, he would be terrified. The Guannan constables looked at each other and said lightly, "We don't want much. There are 8 of us here, and each of us has 10 taels of purple gold. 80 taels is enough." Hearing this, Lu Chengqian's expression suddenly changed, and he quickly said, "Gentlemen, my Lu family really can't take out so much purple gold." In fact, the Lu family had 80 taels of purple gold before, but this group of people had come to the Lu family 3 times in a few months, so how could they take out these things? The Jianghu constables heard this and sneered, "Can't take it out? Well, then come with me to Guannan Torture Hall." Chapter 506. The Jianghu arresters of Guannan were here to pick a fight. Anyway, this was Guanxi. What could they do even if they forced all the martial arts forces in Guanxi to rebel? It was the Guanxi branch that was having a headache. Moreover, Yin Batong had come with the intention of making trouble. He had even told his men not to worry so much. They could go too far, and if anything happened, he would take the blame. At this time, the people of the Lu family were filled with righteous indignation. This was going too far. If the Guanxi branch didn't care, they could go to the headquarters of the punishment hall to reason with them. But at this moment, a voice came from behind them. People from the Guannan branch came to Guanxi to arrest people. Who gave you the guts? Chu Xiao came with Ghost Hand King Tang Ya and a dozen other people. There was no anger on his face, but the oppressive atmosphere made the Jianghu arresters of Guannan slightly change their expressions. They had been arrogant here for a while, but Chu Xiao didn't show up. The words they had thought of didn't work, and the Ghost Hand King and the others didn't dare to meet them. So the Jianghu arresters of Guannan were very arrogant. But now, seeing Chu Xiao coming, and thinking of the rumors about Chu Xiao in the Guanzhong torture room and his reputation in Jianghu, even the Jianghu arresters who had been prepared couldn't help but feel a little nervous. But when they thought of Yin Batong behind them, the Jianghu arresters of Guannan torture hall seemed to be a little more courageous. He forced himself to say, "Official Chu, we didn't come to Guanxi to arrest people, but to trace the smuggling clues from Guannan to Guanxi. According to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, if Official Chu wanted to take over the case, we would naturally hand it over. But Official Chu wasn't here before, so no one else was qualified to ask us to hand over the case." Chu Xiao stared at the cultivator from the Guannan branch. His expression didn't change in the slightest as he calmly said, "Let me ask you, who gave you the courage to come to Guanxi to arrest people?" Under Chu Xiao's gaze, the Guannan martial artist's forehead gradually oozed a layer of cold sweat, but he still forced himself to say, "Official Chu, I've already said that this is the rule." Chu Xiao waved his hand and cut off the martial artist's words. "I don't want to ask the same thing a third time. Since you don't want to tell me who gave you the courage, I'll just take it that you're extremely bold. Also, don't talk about rules with me. The premise of talking about rules is that you have the qualifications and strength. Only then can we play under the same rules. Who do you think you are to talk about rules with me?" Chu Xiao turned to Tang Ya and the others and said, "Break all their legs, abolish their martial arts, and let them crawl back to Guannan. I'd like to see if they still have the courage at that time." The Guannan martial artists' expressions suddenly changed, and they hurriedly said, "Official Chu, we are." But before they could finish speaking, Tang Ya and the others had already made their move. Previously, because of the Ghost Hand King's obstruction, Tang Ya and the others were unbearably aggrieved. Now that Chu Xiao had finally returned, if anything happened, Official Chu would naturally take responsibility. Since this was the case, what was there for them to be afraid of? Therefore, Tang Ya and the others directly attacked, and in an instant, the 8 Guannan martial artists' legs were broken and crippled. Miserable howls sounded instantly. Listening to the miserable howls, Lu Chengqian and the other Lu family members all trembled. Before, they still had some resentment towards Chu Xiao, but now they didn't even dare to have the slightest bit of resentment. At this time, Chu Xiao also looked at Lu Chengqian and said lightly, "Lu family head, you have been wrong during this time." Lu Chengqian hurriedly said respectfully, "Don't dare, my lord, please don't say that. It was those Guannan people who went too far." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, I, Chu Xiu, am not an unreasonable person. As long as you are willing to abide by my rules, then if anything happens, it will be my responsibility. This time it was my negligence. I will compensate for your Lu family's loss. Saying this, Chu Xiu directly threw out a cultivation method, but it was not his own cultivation method, but an ordinary cultivation method passed down by the Guanzhong torture room to the Jianghu constables. It was only a third revolution cultivation method, but it was extremely precious for the Lu family. When Lu family head saw that cultivation method, although he was also extremely envious, he still said, Official Chu, you don't have to do this, I am ashamed to accept it. Chu Xiu said lightly, I told you to accept it, so accept it. I don't want to say the same thing twice. Hearing this, Lu family head immediately put away the cultivation method, and shed tears of gratitude to Chu Xiu, without a trace of resentment in his heart. Ghost Hand King, who was behind, nodded. Milord's methods were getting more and more skillful. With such a combination of kindness and power, the Lu family would probably have to be respectful to Milord from now on, let alone resenting Milord. Listen to Official Chu. Even if you were wronged, Official Chu would make it up to you, and he would never let you suffer losses. On the contrary, if you were disobedient, the Guannan martial artists who were still wailing on the ground were a good example. One day after this incident, all the martial arts forces in the entire Guanxi area knew that Official Chu was back. In the past, when Chu Xiu was here, those martial arts forces still resented him in their hearts, feeling that Chu Xiu was too lenient and too strict. But this time, when people from the Guannan area came to their door, they realized that although Chu Xiu was a little strict, once something happened, they still needed Chu Xiu to take responsibility. Thus, not only did this incident not affect Chu Xiu's reputation, but it also caused his reputation to soar. Of course, while Chu Xiu's reputation soared, some people, such as Yin Batong, were furious at this time. Chu Xiu, you are so lawless. After seeing his 8 men's martial arts destroyed by Chu Xiu and their legs broken, Yin Batong was so angry that he directly smashed the table next to him. In fact, Yin Batong had already known the news that Chu Xiu returned to Guangzhong, but he did not ask his men to restrain themselves. Anyway, they had already caused trouble, so why should they restrain themselves? Chu Xiu was indeed famous in Jianghu, but here was the Guangzhong torture room. Everyone here was a torture officer, so everything had to be done according to the rules. Yin Batong had been in the Guangzhong torture room for a lifetime. No one knew these rules better than him. Chu Xiu was far from being able to compete with him in this aspect. However, Yin Batong did not expect that Chu Xiu did not care about the rules at all and directly destroyed 8 of his men. If Yin Batong swallowed this matter, he would not be able to stay in the Guangzhong torture room anymore. Let's go. Come with me to find Chu Xiu and ask for an explanation. As his voice fell, Yin Batong went straight to the Guanxi branch with a group of people. At the gate of the Guanxi branch, Tanya moved a chair over and leaned against it lazily to guard the door. Tanya naturally would not do something like guarding the door, but Chu Xiu had said that Yin Batong would definitely come to make trouble, so Tanya volunteered to guard the door here. He had also been very sullen during this period of time. If it were not for Ghost Hand Lord stopping him, not to mention Yen Bugui wanting to make a move, even he could not help but want to kill those arrogant guys. At this moment, at the end of the long street, Yin Batong came to the door with a gloomy face with a group of people. Seeing Tanya, Yin Batong said coldly, Let Chu Xiu come out to see me. Tanya glanced at him and did not say anything. Yin Batong suddenly showed a touch of anger on his face and shouted, I said, let Chu Xiu come out to see me. Are you blind or deaf? Didn't you hear me? Tanya did not even look up and sneered. Ridiculous. You don't even say your name? If you don't say your name, how would I know which Tom, Dick, or Harry you are? Besides, even if you say your name, Official Chu is busy with work, so he won't meet Tom, Dick, or Harry. Disrespectful words. You're courting death. Yin Buotong's eyes showed a touch of anger. He took a step forward and immediately blasted a palm at Tanya. However, at this time, Tanya's figure was like a willow catkin. His figure was erratic and he easily dodged Yin Buotong's palm. This caused Yin Batong to be taken aback. Yin Buotong's nickname was the Shadowless Dragon. Although he was fat and short, his movement speed was not ordinary. However, where did this subordinate of Chu Xiu come from? He actually had such a cultivation level of speed at the Three-Flower Realm. However, after being stunned for a while, Yin Batong became even more furious and wanted to attack Tangya. However, at this time, Chu Xiu's cold voice came from inside. Yin Batong, how dare you touch my people in my territory? Do you want to die? Pushing the door open, Chu Xiu slowly walked out of the Guanxi branch with his men. When Yin Batong saw Chu Xiu, his eyes suddenly turned red, and he angrily said, Chu Xiu, what do you mean by crippling 8 of my Jianghu constables? Killing each other is strictly prohibited in the Guanzhong torture room. What you've done has violated the rules of the torture chamber. If you don't give me an explanation today, I'll go to the hallmaster and ask for justice. Narrowing his eyes, Chu Xiu said faintly, Law? Justice? Yin Batong, you know what those idiots under your command did. They offended their superiors, and it's already good enough that I didn't kill them. And you, don't think that I don't know who gave them the courage to do this. Wei Jiuduan is dead, and the grudges of the past should be written off. However, you've provoked my bottom line again and again. Do you really want to die? When Chu Xiu said the last sentence, an extremely strong pressure suddenly fell on Yin Batong. It was extremely fierce, and it immediately made Yin Batong's hair stand on end. There was a serious look in his eyes. In fact, Yin Batong was also considered a figure in the Jianghu. As the torture officer of Guannan, he could be considered a veteran in the Jianghu. He was also a person with real power in the Guanzhong torture room. However, the problem was that compared to Chu Xiu, Yin Batong's experience was like a frog at the bottom of a well. It was not worth mentioning. Now, those who could compete with Chu Xiu were the top talents of the younger generation, as well as the warriors of the older generation who had reached the Master Realm. To put it bluntly, Yin Batong was now not even qualified to challenge Chu Xiu. Chapter 507. Under Chu Xiu's pressure, Yin Batong felt a sense of horror in his heart. This was a feeling of fear, and it made Yin Batong feel very ashamed. He was a martial artist of the older generation, and his experience in the Guanzhong torture room was much deeper than Chu Xiu's. But now, he was actually suppressed to such a state in front of Chu Xiu. How could Yin Batong tolerate this? Taking a deep breath, Yin Batong snorted coldly. Chu Xiu, don't talk so much nonsense. You crippled 8 of my subordinates. You have to give me an explanation for this matter. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Explanation? You still want an explanation? Fine, I'll give you an explanation. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's entire body was instantly enveloped by a murderous intent. A boundless ferocious aura covered Chu Xiu's entire body. With a punch, he executed the immortal slaying god, heaven extinguishing earth annihilating oblivion killing fist. Being enveloped by that boundless ferocious aura, Yin Batong was instantly shocked. He had never expected that Chu Xiu would actually attack without any hesitation. He had already used a killing move right from the start. This time, when he saw Chu Xiu, Yin Batong had a strange feeling. It was only now that he understood what was strange about Chu Xiu. This Chu Xiu's attitude was completely different from before. Although Chu Xiu was also very aggressive before, in the eyes of those in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was still an outstanding figure among the younger martial artists. When facing other torture officers, he could still maintain a respectful attitude. Even when facing Yin Batong, who deliberately caused trouble for Chu Xiu actually retorted verbally within the rules. But this time, when Chu Xiu faced him again, his attitude was extremely unyielding. No, it would be more appropriate to say that he was arrogant. He had no scruples at all. This was the change in attitude brought about by the gap in strength. Chu Xiu was a person who abided by the rules, but at the same time, he was also a person who did not like to abide by the rules. Your strength is the same as mine, so I'll play with you within the rules. However, if you're weaker than me, then there's no need to talk about rules. You can just attack me. Currently, in the entire Guanzhong torture room, there weren't many people who were qualified to talk to Chu Xiu about the rules. Obviously, Yin Batong wasn't that person. Under Chu Xiu's punch, Yin Batong was horrified. His first reaction was not to block, but to escape. Yin Batong's figure moved, and his gang chi spread all over his body like a gale. Then, he hurriedly retreated. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's left hand formed a seal with a single hand. The wisdom fist seal was displayed, And in an instant, the Gangqi field spread out. The net of heaven and earth, imprisoning everything. In the Wisdom Fist Seal's Gangqi field, Yin Botong's figure was not even as fast as a pheasant, not to mention a flying dragon. He could only watch as Chu Xiu's punch blasted towards him. The murderous aura was sharp, tearing everything apart. At this critical moment, a figure shrouded in a black robe suddenly appeared in front of Yin Botong and said in a hoarse voice, "Annihilating heaven and destroying earth, annihilating selfless killing punch? Young man, you've killed quite a lot of people. What do you think of this punch of mine?" As soon as he finished speaking, the black-robed man also blasted out a punch. The scarlet murderous aura around him condensed into a vortex, causing heaven and earth to howl and the wind and rain to change. It was actually the same annihilating heaven and destroying earth, annihilating selfless killing punch. As the two fists collided, the murderous aura on Chu Xiu's punch was instantly torn apart by the other party. A powerful force penetrated through his bones, causing Chu Xiu's expression to change. A wave of demonic aura rose around him, even with a wisp of golden light. This was the power that belonged to the nine heavens' demonic golden body. Bursts of demonic aura were heard, and Chu Xiu retreated more than 10 steps before he stopped. There was a hint of fear in his eyes as he looked at the black-robed man. The other party was also a martial Dao master, and he was much stronger than Xiao Liandong, who had died in his hands. The black-robed man looked at Chu Xiu and said with a chuckle, "I've heard about you from Si Ming. Young man, your strength is not bad, but don't be too arrogant. Don't think that you can look down on all martial Dao masters just because you killed a useless master." Yin Botong, who was behind, immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the black-robed man make a move. In fact, before coming here, Yin Botong had not expected Chu Xiu to actually kill him. However, Yin Botong was a veteran of the Jianghu, and he was used to being cautious. After all, Chu Xiu had a reputation in the Jianghu for killing martial Dao masters. Therefore, Yin Botong had used the connections he had accumulated to find a backer. He had originally done this just in case, but he had not expected that this backer would really come in handy. Chu Xiu squinted at the black-robed man and asked, "Who are you?" The black-robed man stood with his hands behind his back and said calmly, "I'm Feng Sha, the second in command of the criminal division. Come to think of it, I can be considered your superior. You're also a secret agent of the criminal division." Yin Botong had spent his entire life in the Guanzhong torture room, so his connections were certainly not that simple. In the past, Feng Sha and Yin Botong had both been born at the bottom of the Guanzhong torture room, and they had worked their way up to their current positions. Although they were not life-and-death friends, and there was a huge gap between their current strength, they still had some ties. All these years, as the disciplinary officer, Yin Botong had only begged Feng Sha a few times. Instead, he had always kept in contact with him. This time, Yin Botong had asked Feng Sha for help, and Feng Sha would not refuse. Chu Xiu squinted at Feng Sha. He had heard of this person before. Although Chu Xiu was not a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room, after becoming the disciplinary officer of the Guanzhong torture room, he had learned many secrets about the Guanzhong torture room. The real combat power of the Guanzhong torture room was in the criminal division, and everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew this. However, one could tell just by looking at the third leader, Si Ming. He was at the peak of the unity of heaven and man realm, and his combat power was extremely strong. Among the 4 disciplinary officers, the only one who could easily defeat Si Ming was the Guangdong disciplinary officer, Xiao Yi. Even with Si Ming's strength, he was only the third leader. One could imagine how strong the second leader and first leader of the criminal division were. Guan Siyu was not the only martial arts grandmaster in the Guanzhong torture room. However, if there came a day when the Guanzhong torture room had to reveal all its strength, then the entire Guanzhong torture room would not be far from being destroyed. Chu Xiu had heard about Feng Sha's background from Mei Qinglian. His background could be considered legendary. He was originally a young lieutenant in the Eastern Qi army, but he was severely injured during a battle with the Northern Yan army and was thrown into a pile of corpses. It was Chu Kuanga who rescued him from the pile of corpses and brought him back to the Guanzhong torture room. After recovering from his injuries, Feng Sha changed his name and joined the criminal division. It was not only to repay a debt of gratitude, but also to seek revenge. It was only later that Feng Sha found out that the reason why he lost the battle with the Northern Yan army was that he was framed during the political struggle in the Eastern Qi imperial court. He was innocent and implicated in it. Therefore, Fang Sha had been staying in the criminal division ever since. His methods were ruthless and cruel. If Si Ming was said to be decisive and merciless, then Fang Sha's methods could be described as cruel. Moreover, after Fang Sha stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm, he returned to the Eastern Qi alone to seek revenge and annihilated his enemy's entire family. According to Mei Qinglian, this matter had aroused some dissatisfaction from Guan Siyu. However, Guan Siyu did not stop Fang Sha. The criminal division was the Guanzhong torture room's last line of defense. It was also the Guanzhong torture room's most powerful trump card. Although Guan Siyu was the hall leader, her words did not really carry enormous weight. At the very least, Fang Sha and Guan Siyu were of the same generation. It was only because of Chu Kuangga's kindness that he appointed Guan Siyu as the hall leader that he became obedient. However, Fang Sha would not only listen to Guan Siyu's words when it came to certain critical matters. Chu Xiao did not expect Yin Batong to have such a relationship. Looking at Fang Sha, Chu Xiao said calmly, "Leader Fang, this is a personal grudge between Yin Batong and me. You're the leader of the criminal division. Why are you interfering in this matter?" Fang Sha said in a hoarse voice. "Personal grudge? You're all from the Guanzhong torture room. What personal grudge is there? Young man, how long have you been in the Guanzhong torture room? Don't treat the torture room's rules like child's play." Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "This has nothing to do with how long I've been in the Guanzhong torture room. Some people have been in the Guanzhong torture room their entire lives, but they have achieved nothing. At the very least, I, Chu Xiao, have helped the Guanzhong torture room make a name for itself in the underworld. How can a person who does not do his job be qualified?" When Yin Batong heard this, he immediately became angry. However, he did not continue arguing with Chu Xiao. Yin Batong said to Fang Sha, "Brother Fang, there's no need to talk nonsense with him. Someone broke the Guanzhong torture room's rules. We can't let this matter go. Let's reason with the hall leader." Yin Batong had seen the power of Chu Xiao's punch just now. It was so powerful that it frightened him. When it came to Chu Xiao's strength, Yin Batong had lost the courage to fight him head-on. Moreover, based on his understanding of Fang Sha, their relationship was not to the extent that Fang Sha would teach Chu Xiao a lesson just to help him vent his anger. Yin Batong glanced coldly at Chu Xiao, snorted coldly, and left with Fang Sha. At this time, Tangya walked out and shook his head in disdain. Yin Batong has lived for so long, but in the end, he only knows how to file a complaint. What a disgrace. Chu Xiao said indifferently, "Don't look down on filing a complaint. Sometimes, when the superior is accused too many times, even if you are in the right, it may become unreasonable. There's something called inertia. When someone files a complaint for the first time, the superior won't believe it. But when the second and third time, or a second or third person files a complaint, the superior will definitely think, why did someone have to file a complaint against you and not others? Is there a problem with you too?" When Tangya heard this, he wanted to refute. He had a feeling that Chu Xiao's words were fallacious. However, when he thought about it carefully, Tangya helplessly realized that what Chu Xiao said actually made sense. "Then sir, what do we do now?" "Wait for Yin Batong to file a complaint?" Tangya asked. Chu Xiao's eyes flickered with an indecipherable light. "Of course we pack up and prepare to wait for the hall leader's summons. I want to see what tricks Yin Batong has up his sleeve this time." Chapter 508. The difference in strength would bring about a change in mentality. This was the case for the current Chu Xiao. In the past, when Chu Xiao was weak, he had to rely on the Guanzhong torture room to ensure his safety. Just like Chen Qingdi's evaluation of Chu Xiao's scheming was much deeper than Lu Fengxian's, and he did not have many principles. Therefore, Chu Xiao had chosen a reliable backer early on. At that time, Chu Xiao needed the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, Chu Xiao had schemed in many ways and joined the Guanzhong torture room as an inspector. But now, Chu Xiao had become the fourth outstanding figure on the Longhu list. He also had the powerful battle power of a grandmaster. For the Guanzhong torture room now, it was no longer Chu Xiao who needed the Guanzhong torture room. It was Guanzhong torture room that needed Chu Xiao. Now, if Chu Xiao wanted to find a capable backer, there were many forces in the underworld who would gladly welcome Chu Xiao. Moreover, Chu Xiu could choose to directly expose his identity of the Devil Dao and completely appear in the underworld as a member of the Yinma lineage. Anyway, there were many ways out for Chu Xiu. If the Guanzhong torture room forced him, the fourth on the Longhu list, out of the Guanzhong torture room, he would really become a laughingstock in the underworld. A few days later, as expected, someone from the torture chamber's headquarters came to invite Chu Xiu to the torture chamber's headquarters. The person who came to invite Chu Xiu was Guan Siyu's disciple, Yuqi. After seeing Chu Xiu, Yuqi cupped his hands and said to Chu Xiu respectfully, "Official Chu, Yin Batong complained about you in front of Master. This matter is not small, so Master wants you to go and settle this matter." Yuqi's attitude toward Chu Xiu was very respectful. He simply regarded Chu Xiu as an existence on the same level as his master, Guan Siyu. Yuqi had always been a person who had a sense of propriety. Although Chu Xiu had joined the Guanzhong torture room at the beginning, Chu Xiu's status was as different as heaven and earth. Perhaps Yin Batong and the others who had been in the Guanzhong torture room for a long time still relied on their seniority to look down on Chu Xiu. However, in the eyes of the younger generation of warriors like Yuqi, Chu Xiu's achievements were absolutely at a level that they had to look up to. Yuqi understood very well that with Chu Xiu's current reputation and status in the underworld, the Guanzhong torture room needed Chu Xiu far more than Chu Xiu needed the Guanzhong torture room. Therefore, from Yuqi's speech just now, Chu Xiu could hear some inclination. Yuqi called Chu Xiu master, but he directly called Yin Batong by his name. This was already very obvious. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Brother Yuqi, you don't have to do this. You and I are old acquaintances. Wouldn't this make us seem distant?" Yuqi just smiled and didn't say anything. Chu Xiu gave him face because Chu Xiu wasn't arrogant, but he couldn't take it for granted. After giving a few instructions to the Ghost Hand King and the others, Chu Xiu directly followed Yuqi to the torture chamber's headquarters. On the way, Chu Xiu asked, "Brother Yuqi, after Uncle Yin informed me, did Hall Master Guan have any reaction?" Yuqi said, "Master didn't have any reaction. He only said that he was gathering a few torture chamber masters to discuss matters and asked me to invite you over." Hearing Yuqi say this, Chu Xiu immediately had a plan in mind. The key to this matter didn't lie in Chu Xiu's side, but in Guan Siyu's attitude. Moreover, Chu Xiu also saw some other problems in this matter. It seemed that within the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu actually didn't really mean what she said. It was true that the previous hall master, Chu Kuanga, always meant what he said, but compared to Chu Kuanga, Guan Siyu wasn't just lacking in strength and reputation, but also experience. Among the current generation of torture chamber masters, apart from Wei Zhouduan who had already passed away, the other three could be said to be of the same generation as Guan Siyu. Moreover, apart from the few of them, there was also Feng Sha, who was the second in command of the punishment chamber, and the mysterious big leader. In the past, they only listened to Chu Kuanga. Although Guan Siyu had become the hall master, the punishment chamber couldn't possibly listen to Guan Siyu in everything like they did to Chu Kuanga. In fact, Chu Xiu had already sensed this before. The punishment chamber had so many chiefs, but only Si Ming always followed behind Guan Siyu. It was obvious that among these chiefs, only Si Ming was Guan Siyu's true confidant and would listen to Guan Siyu completely. Logically speaking, it was true that Chu Xiu had been overly ruthless in this matter. Chu Xiu was confident because of his current strength and status. As long as he didn't kill Yin Batong on the spot and put Guan Siyu on the spot, the final outcome of this matter would definitely be Guan Siyu punishing both parties. She would tell Yin Batong not to cause trouble, and she would also reprimand Chu Xiu for not abiding by the rules. But now, Yin Batong had found Feng Sha. This was a trump card for Yin Batong, but in Chu Xiu's opinion, this was a foolish move. As the torture chamber master, Yin Batong was Guan Siyu's direct subordinate. Yet, he was now colluding with the second in command of the punishment chamber. What was the meaning of this? Was it because I, Guan Siyu, did things unfairly? Although Chu Xiu wasn't that well behaved, he had nothing to do with the group of old people in the Guanzhong torture room who had complicated relationships. Chu Xiu would forever be Guan Siyu's subordinate. In this case, Chu Xiu already had a rough idea of how things would develop. After following Yuqi to the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu went straight to the meeting hall. The other torture chamber masters were already there. When Yin Batong saw Chu Xiu, he snorted coldly but didn't say anything. Although Chu Xiu's punch hadn't injured Yin Batong, the news had already spread. Some people even said that if Feng Sha hadn't intervened at the end, Yin Batong would definitely have suffered a huge loss at Chu Xiu's hands. Chu Simo smiled at Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu, you've made a name for yourself in the pugilistic world this time. You killed a grandmaster and stepped into the 4th place on the Longhu leaderboard. Congratulations." Chu Xiu returned the greeting and said, "Official Chu, you don't have to be so polite. We both have the surname Chu, so it feels awkward addressing each other like this. Official Chu is my senior, so you can just call me by my name." Xiaoyi also chuckled and said, "I heard that you have a good relationship with that kid, Feng Qixiao? That kid isn't easy to deal with. It's a good thing you can stand him." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Lord Xiao, you know Feng Qixiao?" Xiaoyi nodded and said, "Don't forget, I'm also from the Forgetting Sword Hut. Back then when that kid, Feng Qixiao, was young, the people of Sword King City often brought him to the other major sword sects to show off. It was called a spar between the younger generation, but it was actually to show off. It's just that although that kid's sword is strong, his mouth is even worse. He was so angry that the disciples of the Forgetting Sword Hut almost fought him to the death, but I stopped them. However, that kid's progress is really terrifying. I'm also old. The junior from back then has now surpassed an old guy like me." Actually, Xiaoyi wasn't that old. His actual age was only around 40, and he was already at the peak of one with heaven. He had the potential to become a martial Dao grandmaster in the future. However, compared to the young geniuses like Feng Qixiao and Chu Xiu, Xiaoyi seemed a little mediocre. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Extraordinary people have extraordinary things. There's nothing wrong with Feng Qixiao's current personality. It's better than someone who likes to play tricks in the dark." At this point, Chu Xiu even glanced at Yin Batong. It was obvious that he was hinting that Yin Batong was stirring up trouble while Chu Xiu was not in Guanxi. "Also, Lord Xiao, you don't have to belittle yourself. With your strength, it's only a matter of time before you step into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm." Xiaoyi laughed and said, "That's the martial Dao Grandmaster realm. There are so many martial artists in the world, and there are countless who want to step into that realm. However, how many of them can break through this bottleneck? I, Xiaoyi, am not that ambitious. I'm already satisfied that I'm able to preserve this bit of strength." After exchanging some pleasantries with Xiaoyi, Chu Xiu also saw the second-in-command of the Criminal Investigations Division, Feng Sha. However, Feng Sha only sat there and did not say a word. Chu Xiu raised his brows. It seemed like he could tell from the seats that everyone present was divided into two sides. Xiaoyi was neutral, but he had always supported Guan Xiyu. Therefore, he sat on the left with Chu Simo. Meanwhile, Feng Sha sat on the right with Yin Batong. However, Feng Sha did not appear to be very close to Yin Batong. After a while, Guan Xiyu brought the Criminal Investigations Division's third-in-command, Si Ming, into the conference hall. Si Ming looked at everyone in the hall, but he did not choose to sit next to Feng Sha. Instead, he sat next to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu secretly raised his brows. It seemed like his previous speculation was right. The Guanzhong torture room was not united, and the Criminal Investigations Division was the same. Looking around at everyone in the hall, Guan Xiyu said in a low voice, "I believe everyone knows why I've gathered everyone here today. The Guanzhong torture room strictly forbids internal strife. This is the bottom line of the Guanzhong torture room. All these years, the Guanzhong torture room has established a foothold between the three countries. Every step we take can be said to be treading on thin ice. Internal strife, which is a waste of our strength for no reason, is absolutely not allowed to happen. Yin Batong, Chu Xiu, tell me, how should this matter be resolved?" Chu Xiu looked indifferent and did not speak, but Yin Batong stood up and cupped his hands at Guan Xiyu. "Hallmaster, Chu Xiu crippled 8 of my Jianghu constables. He is vicious and merciless. He doesn't think of himself as a member of the Guanzhong torture room at all. This fellow is so vicious to his own people. It is obvious what he is thinking. He is probably someone who has made a name for himself in the Jianghu and has grown strong enough to ignore the Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid he already has disloyalty in his heart." When he said this, even Chu Xiu looked at Yin Batong with a trace of astonishment in his eyes. "The older the wiser. This fellow had fought with Wei Jiuduan in the Guanzhong torture room for such a long time. Other than being narrow-minded, his thoughts were also very sinister. His words directly turned the personal grudge between him and Chu Xiu into Chu Xiu not respecting the Guanzhong torture room and harboring disloyalty. And the crux of the matter was that Yin Batong was not wrong. Chu Xiu really thought so. Chapter 509. Following Yin Batong's words, everyone present turned to look at Chu Xiu. In all these years, although there had been infighting in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu was the one who had gone overboard. The other Guanzhong torture rooms infighting had been done in secret. Although there had been casualties, they had at least kept up appearances. But what about Chu Xiu? However, he had openly crippled 8 Guannon cultivators in front of everyone. His attitude could be said to be extremely arrogant. Guan Xiu didn't get angry. He just looked at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, what do you have to say?" Chu Xiu knocked on the table, sighing with each knock. He said in an indignant tone, "Yin Batong, your words really make one's heart turn cold. If I, Chu Xiu, had any other intentions, would I still be sitting here? Yin Batong, do you know that the most favored 13th Prince Xiangchong of the Northern Yan Emperor had personally tried to recruit me and promised me an important position in the court? Yin Batong, do you know that the 2nd Prince LV Longguang of Eastern Qi, who was even more powerful than the Crown Prince, had promised me to join his army? Yin Batong, do you know that in West Chu, the World Alliance's Chen Qingdi looked favorably upon me? His direct disciple Xie Xiaolu and I were good friends? Eastern Qi, Northern Yan, West Chu, with my current strength and reputation, where can I not go in this big world? The reason I stayed in the Guanzhong torture room is because I, Chu Xiu, know what kindness is. In the past, when I was at my lowest, it was the Guanzhong torture room that took me in. Although I have a bit of reputation now, I don't want to abandon Guanzhong torture room. In the end, you're here spouting nonsense and pestering endlessly for the sake of forcing me to leave. Yin Batong, what sort of intentions do you have? Chu Xiu's words were full of self-righteousness, as if he had been greatly wronged. However, in the end, he didn't say why he had crippled the 8 Guannon cultivators. Yin Batong snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, don't try to change the subject here. How do you want to settle the matter of you crippling my 8 subordinates?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "How? Yin Batong, where were they crippled?" "In my Guanxi region. Don't you know why a cultivator from your Guannon land came to my Guanxi land?" Just as Yin Batong was about to say something, Chu Xiu interrupted. "Yin Batong, you don't have to say any more excuses. I don't want to hear them. I crippled 8 of your subordinates. But so what? I'm the Guanxi disciplinary officer. In terms of status, I'm above them. These 8 people didn't respect my superiors. In the long run, the Guanzhong torture room's discipline is bound to be lax. I crippled them now in order to reorganize the Guanzhong torture room's discipline. Isn't that fine?" Chu Xiu was clearly twisting words and forcing logic. Yin Batong secretly looked at Guan Xiu, but she was still expressionless and did not make a sound. Seeing this, Yin Batong also got a little anxious and secretly signaled to Feng Sha with his eyes. He did not plan on letting Feng Sha make a move on Chu Xiu. But in this sort of situation, Feng Sha stood on his side and spoke for him. "That should be fine, right?" Feng Sha coughed when he heard that and said in a hoarse voice, "Chu Xiu, even if we want to reorganize discipline, it's not your turn to make a move. You're the Guanxi disciplinary officer, but you came to deal with Guannon people. If this isn't overstepping your bounds, what is?" Chu Xiu retorted with a question. "Then what should I do?" Feng Sha said. "Naturally report it to the main hall." Chu Xiu sneered and said, "What a joke. I, a dignified Guanxi disciplinary officer, actually have to report it to the main hall to deal with a few low-level minor characters. Where's the dignity of a disciplinary officer? Moreover, if we're talking about overstepping your bounds, the one who really overstepped your bounds should be Lord Feng. Lord Feng, you should know what the criminal division does. Why are you here now?" Feng Sha's eyes revealed a cold glint. Compared to arguing, he was still more willing to take action. Right then, Guan Xiu suddenly said in a deep voice, "All right, all of you shut up." Upon hearing this, everyone present immediately fell silent. Guan Xiu looked at Yin Batong and said in a deep voice, "In Batong, is your Guanan too idle? You even ran to the Guanxi area to investigate? In the future, it's best that you don't meddle in things that don't belong to you." In Batong looked at Guan Siyu in astonishment. He didn't understand why he would suddenly be reprimanded by Guan Siyu. Chu Xiu sneered inwardly. In Batong had too many schemes, but he just didn't understand the most critical point. Since he looked for Fang Sha and asked Fang Sha to speak up for him, it meant that In Batong was no longer on Guan Siyu's side. It could be said that he had completely offended Guan Siyu. In Batong wanted to retort, but he wasn't completely muddle-headed. In the end, he forcefully swallowed his retort. Meanwhile, Guan Siyu turned her gaze to Chu Xiu and snorted coldly. "Also, Chu Xiu, you've caused too much trouble outside recently. Do you still think you're outside after returning to the Guanzhong torture room? You'd better stay in the Guanxi area and reflect on your actions. You're not allowed to take a step out of the Guanxi area." After speaking, Guan Siyu waved her hand and said, "All right, this matter ends here. You're dismissed." Everyone present had a strange look on their faces. Only In Boitong's expression was somewhat ugly. Even an idiot could tell that Guan Siyu was actually protecting Chu Xiu this time. It was obvious that Chu Xiu had crippled someone, but In Batong had been reprimanded. Although Chu Xiu had also been punished to reflect on his actions, this was nothing to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. At this time, he needed to go into seclusion to sort out his strength and build a solid foundation. The so-called reflection could be considered seclusion. Anyway, Chu Xiu didn't plan on going out again. After everyone left, Chu Xiu hadn't left the main hall. At this time, Yuqi suddenly walked out and said in a low voice, "Official Chu, Master wants you to go over." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding and followed Yuqi to Guan Siyu's study. At the moment, Guan Siyu's face was expressionless. It was as if she hadn't been the one reprimanding In Batong and Chu Xiu. As she looked at Chu Xiu, Guan Siyu suddenly sighed and said, "Do you understand what happened before?" Guan Siyu's words were somewhat unclear, but Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I understand. It seems that in the entire criminal division, besides third leader Si Ming, the other two leaders don't seem to respect you, Hallmaster." Guan Siyu sighed again and said, "Ever since I took over the position of Hallmaster, I've been trembling with fear and trepidation. In the end, I developed the Guanzhong torture room to this stage. Unfortunately, to some people, I'm actually very lucky to be in this position. In the past, when Guan Siyu took over the Guanzhong torture room, it couldn't be said that he was lucky. It could only be said that Chu Kuanga had a good eye for talent. However, at that time, Guan Siyu didn't have the greatest authority in the Guanzhong torture room, but Chu Kuanga chose Guan Siyu to become hall master. This was very puzzling. However, in the end, Guan Siyu succeeded and successfully developed the Guanzhong torture room to this stage. This puzzling turned into recognition. Unfortunately, in the Guanzhong torture room, there were still people who didn't recognize Guan Siyu. Not to mention these people's strength, just based on qualifications, they weren't inferior to Guan Siyu's. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "In order for the Guanzhong torture room to reach its current scale, besides Chu Juxia's good foundation, it also couldn't do without Hallmaster's help. Some people just don't know how to appreciate favors. They need to be taught a lesson from time to time." Guan Siyu narrowed his eyes and said, "I've already taught them a lesson. There's no need for a second time. Chu Xiu, you went from being a wanted person to becoming the Guanxi torture room's current Guanxi torture room. The Guanzhong torture room can give you many things. I just hope that you won't betray the torture room. This is the lightest punishment I can give you. If you do it again, you'll be punished severely." After hearing this, Chu Xiu lowered his head and walked out. Guan Siyu had just said that some people needed to be taught a lesson, but in the blink of an eye, Chu Xiu was taught a lesson. In fact, Chu Xiu's behavior this time was somewhat against the rules. He relied on sophistry. Guan Siyu could stand on his side completely because In Batong was muddle-headed and actually joined forces with the people from the Criminal Investigation Division. After leaving Guan Siyu's place, Chu Xiu planned to directly return to Guanxi. He did not expect Mei Qinglian to walk out from the small path with a smile on her beautiful face. "You came to the main hall once, yet you don't plan on coming to see me? Chu Xiu, you really have no conscience." Chu Xiu said with a bitter smile, Madam, if I came to see you, I'm afraid it would be inappropriate. I just came out of Hall Master Guan's place. Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, Come with me. Don't worry. Guan Siyu is very worried right now, so she doesn't have time to care about you. Hearing Mei Qinglian say this, Chu Xiu directly followed Mei Qinglian to her room. After closing the door, Mei Qinglian chuckled and said, You've made quite a name for yourself in West Chu this time. You even killed a martial arts grandmaster. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, Madam Saintess, you don't have to make fun of me. You know my strength. The martial arts master I killed was only a weak rogue cultivator, and I had to use some tricks to kill him. If I encounter a real martial arts master, I can only choose to escape. Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, You don't have to be overly modest. With your current strength, you can already stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen. My Yinma bloodline is lucky to have you among the younger generation. Otherwise, no one would be able to compete with Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen. That little girl from the moon-worshipping cult is very mysterious. Moreover, she is from the bright demon bloodline, so she can't represent my Yinma bloodline. Chu Xiu nodded and said, That's right, Madam Saintess. Guan Siyu still can't completely control the Guanzhong torture room. Is it because of those people from the criminal division? Mei Qinglian snorted and said, What else do you think? I can deal with Guan Siyu, but I can't deal with others. If it weren't for those annoying guys, the Guanzhong torture room would have become a secret branch of my Yinma bloodline. Would I still need to be so careful? Chapter 5:10. Mei Qinglian had stayed in the Guanzhong torture room for a long time. Her understanding of the Guanzhong torture room was naturally much deeper than Chu Xiu's. There was no need to explain why a Yin demon sex saintess was lurking in the Guanzhong torture room. The reason why Mei Qinglian had not succeeded all this time was not because of Guan Siyu, but because of the two leaders of the punishment department and the other people from the punishment department. The reason for this was not because Guan Siyu was not strong enough, but because Guan Siyu had been too hasty when he took over the Guanzhong torture room. In fact, Chu Kuanga had already decided to help Guan Siyu to the position of Hall Master. It was just that Chu Kuanga's death was too hasty. If Chu Kuanga had enough time to help Guan Siyu establish her prestige, then so many things would not have happened. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Saintess, since the two people from the punishment department are so troublesome, why don't you think of a way to get rid of them? With the Yinma clan's strength, it shouldn't be difficult to get rid of them, right? If the Yinma clan could really control the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu would not need to be so secretive. Mei Qinglian glanced at Chu Xiu and said with slight surprise, You're quite vicious. You're prepared to kill right from the start? It's not that I can't do that, but I want a complete Guanzhong torture room, not a broken Guanzhong torture room. Although Guan Siyu would listen to me on some matters, he wasn't my puppet. He was only dissatisfied that the Criminal Investigation Department didn't listen to his orders. He didn't want to ruthlessly eliminate the true trump card of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, the Criminal Investigation Department. Once I do that, Guan Siyu will definitely sense that something is wrong. What should I do then? He even killed Guan Siyu? Chu Xiu nodded, but he did not agree with Mei Qinglian's view. There was no construction without destruction. It was impossible for the Yinma clan to hide in the dark forever. If they wanted more power, they had to use extraordinary means. After chatting with Mei Qinglian for a while, Chu Xiu did not stay any longer. He directly left the headquarters and returned to the Guanxi land to cultivate. He didn't know when it started, but Chu Xiu had become accustomed to considering everything from the perspective of the demonic path. It wasn't because Chu Xiu, the fake inheritor of the Kunlun devil cult, was so loyal to the Yinma bloodline, but because Chu Xiu discovered that in his current situation, the identity of the Yinma bloodline was much more useful than his current identity, and he could be unscrupulous. After returning to Guanxi, Chu Xiu immediately entered seclusion. One reason was to stabilize his current realm, and the other was to cultivate the Nine Heavens Fiend golden body to match his current cultivation. While Chu Xiu was in seclusion, a huge stronghold stood in the dense forest of the northern Yan's Liaodong County. The entire stronghold was covered in white snow, and it would be impossible to find it unless one went deep into the forest. At that moment, there was a circle of chairs in the stronghold's lobby. Two bold words hung on the top of the lobby. Qilian. Right below the two words Qilian, A burly man sat on a chair made of white tiger skin with a gloomy expression on his face. The burly man was tall and sturdy. His exposed muscles seemed to be cast from steel. The most peculiar thing about him was his appearance, which was actually crimson. At that moment, the burly man looked at the people below and said in a deep voice, "Tell me, how many have we lost during this period of time?" A skinny cultivator smiled bitterly and said, "First leader, within a month, all 7 of our strongholds were destroyed. Our brothers suffered heavy casualties. If we can't do it, we can only ask our brothers to retreat." At that moment, another tall warrior stood up and shouted, "Lin Mingtong, what did you say? Withdraw?" It wasn't easy for us to solve the problem of the Northern Yan Imperial Court through the 13th Prince Yongchong, and let the stronghold walk out of the Liaodong forest. Now you want us to withdraw? Won't our efforts be in vain? Lin Mingtong frowned and said, "What else are you going to do? Fight." The righteous manor joined forces with more than 10 sects in eastern Yan to suppress our Qilian stronghold. If we don't withdraw our forces, we can only be defeated one by one. The 36 bandits of the northern land are already in the past. Now, only our Qilian stronghold still exists. If we continue to fight with them, we have no chance of winning. The warrior retorted, "The righteous manor's goal is to force our Qilian stronghold into the Liaodong forest. In the end, they even want to force us out of the northern Yan, or even kill us in one fell swoop. If we take a step back, they will take a step forward. In the end, our Qilian stronghold will have no way to retreat. What are you afraid of? At worst, we will perish together with the righteous manor and fight to the death." Lin Mingtong sneered and said, "Hejan, wake up. We are no longer the 36 bandits of the northern land. What do we have to perish together with them and fight to the death? I'm afraid that in the end, the fish will die, but their net will not be broken." The group of people below was making a ruckus. The red-faced strong man sitting on the main seat suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His originally red face was now slightly pale. The people who were still making a ruckus suddenly panicked and hurriedly shouted, "First Master!" The red-faced strong man waved his hand and sneered, "It's all right. Stone General Han Boshian's strength is indeed not for show." The power of the Haoyang 9 Extremes mysterious art is not inferior to that of the Great Light Temple's bald donkeys. However, Han Boshian was also hit by my flaming divine palm, so he did not feel good either. Which hypocrite of the righteous manor, Nieren Long, did not dare to make a move, but Han Boshian made a move first. But it's all right. Even if the two of them were to attack together, I am not afraid. In the past, I, Pang Hu, had withstood the Imperial Court and the northern fluttering Snow City. If they want to kill me now, it will not be that easy. This red-faced strong man was none other than the last survivor of the 36 bandits of the northern land, the master of the Qilian Iron Cavalry, red-faced Heavenly King Pang Hu. In the past, when Chu Xiu was in Wei County, he had dealt with the red-faced Heavenly King Pang Hu's subordinates, Han Bao and the others. He had also borrowed the strength of Han Bao and the others. However, after Chu Xiu had left Wei County, he had already revealed Pang Hu's location to Han Bao and the others, and instructed them to look for Pang Hu. However, it seemed that the plot had deviated. Pang Hu's Qilian stockade was now in conflict with the righteous manor, and from the looks of it, they were forced to the extreme. Looking at the people below, Pang Hu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said in a low voice, "There's no other way. For the time being, recall the people from the other stockades. However, leave some people outside to keep an eye on the righteous manor's movements. Be careful." Hejan was slightly unwilling. "First Master, are we going to have to give in?" Pang Hu snorted coldly. "Of course this matter is not over. However, with just the strength of the Qilian stockade, we can only fight the righteous manor head-on. The outcome is that our chances of winning are not high. You are all my old brothers who have followed me for decades. Naturally, I will not let you die with me." Hejan and the others immediately said, "First Master, when have we, the Qilian Iron Cavalry, ever been afraid of death? In the past, we even dared to go against the Northern Yan Imperial Court, let alone the righteous manor." Pang Hu waved his hand and said, "All right, you are not afraid of death, but I do not want to die with you. I have never begged anyone in my life, but now, I can only ask for help." Hejan was stunned. "Beg who?" Pang Hu's expression was a little ugly. After hesitating for a while he said, "I beg a woman from the Inma clan." Pang Hu was conflicted because he wanted to beg a woman. However, the people below were concerned that the first master actually wanted to beg someone from the demonic Tao. They really did not know that the first master actually had such an important relationship with the demonic Tao. Lin Mu Tong said hesitantly, "First master, as far as I know, the Yinma clan is not having it easy either. They are being chased by the righteous sects, and their relationship with the bright demons is not good. If we are related to them, will we attract trouble?" Although the Northern 36 bandits did not have a good reputation, that was only a matter of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. In other places, they did not care who the Northern 36 bandits were. As for the Yinma clan, they were ostracized by the entire Jianghu. Pang Hu snorted lightly. "Our Chilean stockade is already at the point of life and death. How can we care so much? Regardless of whether they are from the demonic Tao or the evil Tao, I am already prepared to throw away my pride and beg for help. Are you still not willing?" Hearing Pang Hu's words, the others did not say a word. In the past, during the era of the Northern 36 bandits, Pang Hu was not the strongest among the 36 bandits. However, his character was the most stubborn one. Indeed, he had never begged for help. "Han Bao, this time, you will make the trip." Following Pang Hu's words, Han Bao stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, leader." At this time, Han Bao already had the cultivation of the three-flower realm. For a talent like him, it was already somewhat incredible. In the past, Han Bao was Pang Hu's personal guard. After he joined forces with Chu Xiu, Han Bao earned a lot of gold and silver resources from Shangmang Mountain. Originally, he could have continued to dominate Shangmang Mountain. However, he was loyal to Pang Hu and traveled thousands of miles to bring things to Pang Hu. This made Pang Hu quite touched. Therefore, among Pang Hu's subordinates, Han Bao's strength was not as good as Lin Mutong, He Zhan, and the others. However, he was the most trustworthy one. After sending the others away, Pang Hu handed a letter to Han Bao and said, "Go to the Guanzhong torture room and give this letter to Guan Siyu's wife, Mei Qinglian. Tell her whatever she asks you. There is no need to hide anything from her. Tell her that as long as she helps our Chilean stockade solve the crisis this time, if her hidden devil clan needs us in the future, our Chilean stockade will go through fire and water without hesitation." When he mentioned that Mei Qinglian was Guan Siyu's wife, Pang Hu suddenly paused. His tone became a little strange, as if he had eaten a fly. Han Bao was a little curious and wanted to ask something, but he was stopped by Pang Hu's glare. "If I ask you to go, just go. Why are you asking so many questions?" Chapter 5:11. A month later, in the backyard of the Guanzhong torture room, Han Bao stood there trembling with fear. He did not dare to look at the woman in front of him. Previously, Han Bao had wanted to ask Pang Hu why he had sought help from the demonic path, but in the end, he had come to find Guan Siyu's wife. But when he saw Mei Qinglian, Han Bao realized how terrifying this woman in front of him was. She was so beautiful that he did not dare to look at her directly. Similarly, her strong aura did not let Han Bao have any improper thoughts. This woman was like a poisonous rose. She looked gorgeous, but as long as you touched her lightly, the poison would be able to kill you without leaving even your bones. Holding the letter written by Pang Hu, Mei Qinglian smiled and shook her head. "Pang Hu, that big fool, is still so stubborn. I told him before that the 36 bandits of the northern land have no future. If you want to go against the imperial court, you have to find a way to do it. Just like the 36 bandits of the northern land. If the imperial court does not destroy them, who else would they destroy? Now that you are struggling at death's door and have preserved some of your strength, why are you going against the Morgue village?" Although Han Bao was very dissatisfied with Mei Qinglian's description of them as struggling at death, he thought of Pang Hu's previous instructions. Han Bao could only say obediently, "This time, it really wasn't our Chilean stockade village that started the trouble. After the 36 bandits of the northern land were destroyed, Chilean village has nothing to do with them. This time, it was the Morgue village who initiated the trouble. They even united more than 10 aristocratic families of the northern Yen and formed the Morgue village alliance to kill Chilean village. The head of the Morgue village, Nieren Long, pretended to be benevolent and was despicable. He was not confident that he could defeat the first master in a one-on-one fight. He even asked the northern Yen martial arts tycoon, Stone General Han Ba, to fight first. The great leader fought with Han Ba and both of them suffered some injuries. The great leader really couldn't hold on any longer, so he sent me to ask the hidden devil clan for help. As long as the Inma clan helps Qilian Stockade Village to overcome this crisis, if the Inma clan needs anything in the future, Qilian Stockade Village will not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. Mei Qinglian chuckled. Suddenly, like a flower blooming, the whole room seemed to be brighter. However, Han Bao still did not dare to look at Mei Qinglian. Instead, he lowered his head even more. Why is Pang Hu acting so serious? We're old acquaintances. How can I ignore him when he's begging me? All right, you can wait here for a few days. I will find you a reliable person to ensure that your Qilian Stockade Village can survive this crisis. Han Bao heaved a sigh of relief when he heard what Mei Qinglian said. However, he was also curious about the relationship between the first leader and Madame Guan. Both parties seemed to have a past. Although Han Bao was gossipy, he did not dare to think that Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian had an old relationship. Although Han Bao still admired the first leader, after meeting Mei Qinglian, he knew that a woman like Mei Qinglian could not be tamed by an ordinary man. It was the same for his first leader Pang Hu. In the Guanxi Punishment Hall, where Chu Xiu was cultivating in seclusion. At this moment, Chu Xiu's upper body was naked. His entire body was enveloped in boundless devil qi. The devil qi was extremely pure, but at this moment, the devil qi had turned into needles and seeped into Chu Xiu's body. It cleansed all of Chu Xiu's meridians and all of his qi and blood. When the devil qi refined his body, the intense pain was like a death by 1,000 cuts. It penetrated deep into his bones. Even though Chu Xiu's mental strength was strong, he could not shield himself from the pain. He could only endure it. Chu Xiu's body was trembling slightly. Sweat flowed out from his pores like water. There was even a trace of blood mixed in it. However, he endured it and did not make a sound. After all, the soundproofing of the seclusion was not very good. If Chu Xiu made any sound inside, people outside might think that Chu Xiu was doing something strange while cultivating in seclusion. At this moment, a black mist rose from the seclusion. Mei Qinglian's figure walked out of it. She looked at Chu Xiu with interest, who was cultivating the 9 heavens demonic golden body. Chu Xiu had already sensed that Mei Qinglian was the moment she appeared. Therefore, Chu Xiu was not nervous. He just cultivated step by step. After completing this stage of refining his body, Chu Xiu withdrew the devil qi around his body. Seeing that Mei Qinglian was still staring at him, Chu Xiu picked up the clothes beside him and put them on. He was a little speechless. Saintess, can you tell me the next time you appear? Don't appear and disappear so mysteriously. Let me be mentally prepared. Mei Qinglian snorted and said, You are cultivating in bed, not playing with women in bed. Why do you need to be mentally prepared? Chu Xiu smiled bitterly. How could he reply to Mei Qinglian's tough words? Just now, you cultivated Marquis Lu Wenho's 9 heavens demonic golden body? Mei Qinglian asked curiously. Chu Xiu nodded. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, This cultivation method's conditions are too harsh. With your physique you can cultivate it. However, if it were someone else, I'm afraid that they would easily waste themselves. Although this cultivation method is called the 9 transformations, it is the lowest among the 9 transformations. There are only a few who can cultivate it to the peak. Chu Xiu smiled and said, In this world, there is no strongest cultivation method. There are only the strongest people. In fact, it is unreasonable to evaluate cultivation methods according to their grades. Some people can reach the peak by relying on a first revolution cultivation method. Some people even have a 9 transformations cultivation method, but they are still trash. So in my opinion, any cultivation method can't be judged by its grade, but by the person who cultivates it. Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. She didn't expect that Chu Xiu actually had his own views on martial arts, and what he said was very reasonable. Martial Dao Grandmaster was actually an honorific title in the beginning, not referring to strength. However, for most martial artists, they only had their own views on martial arts after stepping into the real pellet state. So slowly, Martial Dao Grandmaster became another title for the real pellet state. So under the real pellet state, as long as you have a unique view on martial arts, you can actually be regarded as a Martial Dao Grandmaster. Chu Xiu also asked Mei Qinglian at this time, Madam Saint came to me, is there something wrong with the Inma clan? Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "It's not about the Yinma clan, but some of my own private matters. I want to ask you for help." With that said, Mei Qinglian told Chu Xiu about Qilian village. Finally, Mei Qinglian said, "Pang Hu is my old friend. He is now asking me for help, but I can't turn a blind eye to it. But I can't leave here, so I can only let you make this trip." Facing the Morgue Manor, what Pang Hu and the others lack is actually not strength, but brains. If those bandits who only know how to fight all day to face the Morgue Manor alliance, they will be killed sooner or later. If you help them with the layout, they will probably be in a different situation. And I seem to have heard that you also have a lot of hatred with the Morgue Manor alliance. This time, you can also teach the people of the Morgue Manor a lesson. After you come back, there will be a lot of rewards on my side. After listening to Mei Qinglian's words, Chu Xiu's eyes showed a trace of a strange look. When he tricked Han Bao into looking for Pang Hu, he was actually just using Han Bao. He did not expect that there would be a day where he could continue to deal with Pang Hu. In fact, Chu Xiu had almost forgotten about Pang Hu. And now, the development of Qilian village was also very different from the original plot. In the original plot, Pang Hu led his Qilian iron cavalry in the dense forest of Liaodong to recuperate. When they were strong enough, they began to come out of the mountains again and looted the land of Liaodong in northern Yan. This caused a lot of trouble for the northern Yan imperial court. In the end, a large number of forces were sent to suppress them. And now, no one knew what had affected Pang Hu. He was not as savage as in the original plot. He just obediently recuperated in the dense forest of Liaodong and steadily developed his forces. Step by step he built a branch. He even reached a reconciliation with the Northern Yan Imperial Court through his relationship with the 13th Prince, Xiang Chong. However, maybe even God did not want Pang Hu's men to have a good time. The Morgue Manor actually joined forces with more than 10 forces to enter Liaodong. They wanted to completely destroy Qilian village and had almost pushed Pang Hu to the limit. And in the original plot, Chu Xiu did not remember that the Morgue Manor had once formed an alliance. Now it seemed that there was a deviation in the plot. Chu Xiu thought for a while and said in a low voice, "Saintess, this is not a good task. The Morgue Manor has a grudge with me, that's true, but there are 2 martial Dao grandmasters in the Morgue Manor. Qilian village is also being suppressed by them. What can I do if I go alone? If I want to reverse the situation, it will be extremely difficult." Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, "If it was easy, would I still come to you? Don't think that this is a hard task. The benefits you can get after this will be beyond your imagination. You don't know Pang Hu's character. He rarely asks for help and hates owing favors. If you help him this time, Pang Hu will feel that he owes you a favor for a lifetime. As long as you don't deliberately send him to his death, if you need Pang Hu's help in the future, he will definitely not refuse." The power of the Qilian Iron Cavalry is also extraordinary. They were the existence that could fight against the 5 armies of the Northern Yan Kingdom. They are definitely stronger than you think. Chu Xiu moved his body and revealed a thoughtful look in his eyes. Now, Chu Xiu was no longer the demonic junior, who could only obey orders. With Chu Xiu's strength and ability, he had the right to refuse and also the right to negotiate, even if the other party was Mei Qinglian, the saintess of the Shadow Demon sect. So now, Chu Xiu was only thinking about the benefits of this matter, and whether it was worth it for him to take action. Chapter 5:12. Speaking of which, Chu Xiu and the 36 northern bandits were fated. After all, Chu Xiu relied on the cooperation of Han Bao and the others to successfully establish a foothold in Wei County. So now, Chu Xiu did not mind helping Pang Hu once. Of course, the premise was that Mei Qinglian did not deceive him. "By the way, Holy Maiden, I am now under house arrest by Guan Siyu. How can I help him? At least help me lift the ban first." Chu Xiu suddenly thought of this. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "This time, I want you to use your brain, not your hands. There is no need for you to go with your current identity. Moreover, this time, Pang Hu is asking the Yinma clan for help. You can go with your identity as a demon." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Since that's the case, I'll have to trouble you to take care of the Guanxi land while I'm away. I don't want them to bully me when I return." Mei Qinglian casually waved her hand and said, "Don't worry, what happened last time won't happen again. You caused such a big commotion. As long as Yin Badong isn't an idiot and sees Guan Xiyu's attitude, he won't cause trouble again. Moreover, Guan Xiyu won't tolerate him a second time. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "In that case, take me to see Han Bao. After all, he is also an old acquaintance of mine." Mei Qinglian said in surprise, "You know that guy?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I have some dealings with him." Mei Qinglian did not gossip too much about Chu Xiu's previous problems. After Chu Xiu changed his mask and black clothes, he followed Mei Qinglian to see Han Bao. Han Bao, who had been waiting anxiously for a few days, suddenly became excited when he saw Mei Qinglian bringing a mysterious man dressed in black and wearing a mask. Han Bao had never come into contact with people from the Devil Dao. He didn't even know the difference between the Bright Devil and the Hidden Devil lineage. However, after listening to Pang Hu's detailed explanation, Han Bao thought that the experts of the Yinma clan must be like the person in front of him. They appeared incomparably mysterious, but they were powerful and possessed unique skills. However, when Chu Xiu walked closer, Han Bao suddenly felt that the person in front of him seemed to be only at the unity of heaven and man realm. Although to Han Bao, the oneness of heaven and man state was also a master, but to the current predicament of the Chilean village, the oneness of heaven and man state was nothing. Han Bao asked cautiously, "Lady Saint, is this the person you found to help my Chilean stockade?" Mei Qinglian nodded. "Yes." Han Bao asked hesitantly, "But this lord is only at the unity of heaven and man realm?" Mei Qinglian stared at him. "Why, are you looking down on the person I found for you?" Han Bao quickly waved his hand. No. That's not what I meant, I just..." However, before Han Bao could finish, he was interrupted by Mei Qinglian. "It's not easy for Pang Hu to beg me. Of course, I won't be perfunctory with him. This is Lin Yi, the #1 talent among the younger generation of the Yinma clan." Han Bao was stunned. Not only was he at the oneness of heaven and man realm, but he was also a martial artist of the younger generation. Mei Qinglian said lightly, "Do you know Zhang Qingjin?" Han Bao nodded. "Do you know Zhong Xian?" Han Bao continued to nod. "Do you know Chu Xiu?" Han Bao nodded even more frantically this time. Of course, he knew Chu Xiu. To be honest, Han Bao did not expect that the boy who was ostracized by the Chu family in Wei County would become the 4th on the Longhu leaderboard. He was a young talent who was famous in Jianghu. When he heard that Chu Xiu was serving as the torturer in the Guanzhong torture room, Han Bao wanted to look for Chu Xiu to reminisce about the old days. However, he gave up on the idea after a flash in his mind. Firstly, his status as compared to Chu Xiu was as different as heaven and earth. It was unknown if Chu Xiu would still remember him. Secondly, he came with a mission. The rise and fall of Chilean village were in his hands. Han Bao did not dare to act recklessly in case he caused any trouble. At this moment, Mei Qinglian pointed at Chu Xiu and said lightly, "There are geniuses in Taoism, Buddhism, and Guanzhong torture room. Naturally, there are geniuses in the Yinma clan. Lin Ye's strength is not inferior to Zhang Qingjin, Zhong Xian, and Chu Xiu. If Pang Hu did not come to me personally, do you think I would have sent the most outstanding young talent in the Yinma clan to help him? Are you still not satisfied with the result?" Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, Han Bao quickly said, "I'm satisfied, of course I'm satisfied." Speaking of this, Han Bao took a few glances at Chu Xiu. The more he looked at him, the more he looked like an expert. Of course, Han Bao did not know how powerful the young talents were. Anyway, he only heard that the top 5 on the Longhu list had the strength to fight against a martial Dao master. Since Mei Qinglian said that Lin Yi could stand shoulder to shoulder with Zhang Qingjin and Zhong Xian, he would definitely be able to fight against a grandmaster. Inviting him was equivalent to inviting a martial Dao grandmaster back, and the great leader's task could be considered completed. Thinking of this, Han Bao had no choice but to bid farewell to Mei Qinglian and prepare to return to Liaodong with Chu Xiu. On the way, Han Bao asked Chu Xiu curiously, "May I ask which sect does Mr. Lin belong to in the Yinma clan?" Previously, Han Bao thought that the Yinma clan was just a sect. It was only when Pang Hu informed Han Bao about it that the Yinma clan was also divided into sections. However, looking at Lin Yi and Mei Qinglian, they did not seem to be from the same sect. Chu Xiu chuckled and said in a hoarse voice, "If I say that I'm from the Kunlun devil cult, would you believe me?" Han Bao's expression changed slightly. He forced a smile and said, Mr. Lin, you must be joking. No matter how inexperienced Han Bao was, he knew that the Kunlun devil cult was a taboo in Jianghu. Its identity was much more sensitive than the Yinma clan. However, Han Bao did not know why he had a strange feeling that he seemed to know the person in front of him. However, Han Bao did not think too much about it. At the moment, Qilian village was in a critical situation. Han Bao did not have the leisure to chat with Chu Xiao and delay time. Instead, he rushed all the way to Liaodong County. Although Chu Xiao had stayed in the northern Yan for a long time, he had never been to such a northern place. Liaodong County was close to the extreme north. Almost half of the 4 seasons of the year were covered in snow, especially in the dense forest of Liaodong, which was covered in snow all year round. It was very desolate. At this moment, in the main hall of Qilian village, Pang Hu and his men looked solemn. During the time when Han Bao was away, Qilian village's situation became more and more difficult. It was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. There were too many people in the Loyalty Village Alliance, so many that they could not fight against them. At this moment, someone came in from outside and reported, "Leader, Brother Han Bao has brought someone back." Upon hearing this, everyone's eyes were filled with joy. The reinforcements had finally arrived. Pang Hu nodded and said, "Invite him in." Everyone looked at the door in anticipation. However, when they saw that the person Han Bao brought in was only in oneness of heaven and man realm martial artist who was dressed up mysteriously, they were stunned. Han Bao's trip only brought back a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm? What was the use of that? Although oneness of heaven and man realm martial artists were not weak, Qilian village did not lack them. For example, Lin Mutong, He Zhan, and a few of Pang Hu's confidants were all oneness of heaven and man realm experts. Pang Hu also had doubts in his heart, but he still asked Chu Xiao to sit down first before asking Han Bao, "Han Bao, is this the reinforcement you brought?" Han Bao quickly said, "That's right. This is young Master Lin Yi, an outstanding talent of the Hidden Devil Clan's younger generation. He is comparable to the top 5 talents on the Longhu leaderboard." Upon hearing this, everyone's expression became even weirder. So this Lin Yi was actually a martial artist of the younger generation? As for Han Bao saying that Lin Yi was comparable to the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard, they treated it as a joke. If the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard were so easily comparable, what was the point of Wind Sweeping Tower making this leaderboard? Did they really think that Zhang Qingzhen and the others were vegetarians? He Zhan slammed the table angrily, stood up and scoffed, "Han Bao, I think you're out of your mind. You came all the way to the Guanzhong torture room and you only brought back an oneness of heaven and man realm martial artist. Are you treating the lives of my brothers in Qilian village like a joke?" Han Bao looked aggrieved. Mei Qinglian was the one who gave him the person. He also wanted to bring back a martial Dao master, but she did not give him the Saintess. What did it have to do with him? Just as Han Bao was about to explain, Chu Xiao, who was sitting on a chair, laughed strangely and said, "What? Is everyone looking down on me and disdaining me for being weak? What a joke. Your Qilian stockade village is about to be exterminated, yet you're still being so picky. If it wasn't for the Saintess, do you really think that I would care about the life and death of your Qilian stockade village? Brat, you're asking for it." He Zhan roared. His vigor chi exploded and he pounced at Chu Xiao like a ferocious tiger. He punched and the roar of a tiger echoed in the forest. Pang Hu, who was sitting at the top, frowned and wanted to stop him. Regardless of whether this person could help his Qilian village, Lin Yi was sent by Mei Qinglian. Pang Hu could not watch him get hurt. He Zhan was one of Chu Xiao's subordinates, and was a wandering cultivator. Although he was not a bad person, he had a fiery temper and was easily angered. During this period of time, he had been suppressed too much, so when Chu Xiao casually said a few words, he was immediately enraged and exploded. However, before Pang Hu could make a move, the next scene made everyone's eyes widen. Boundless darkness gathered in Chu Xiao's eyes like a deep whirlpool. The revolving magic of mind demons was unleashed. Chu Xiao's mental strength was condensed into a substance by Chu Xiao, forming 3 transparent strings in front of him. As Chu Xiao gently plucked the strings, the demonic sound instantly suppressed and seized souls, emitting an ear-piercing shriek on the soul level. The 3 invisible strings were shattered, and He Zhan also let out a miserable howl as his body was directly sent flying, smashing into a chair. Soul-suppressing Hades song. Chapter 5:13. As the inherited secret techniques of the demon heart hall, the mental demon rotation technique and the 9 forms of soul assimilation were definitely the pinnacle of mental strength among the same techniques. In Chu Xiu's opinion, they were even stronger than the Xiahou clan's spirit control technique. In the past, when Chu Xiu used the soul-subduing Hades song of the 9 forms of soul assimilation, it could even temporarily affect Qiao Liandong, a martial arts master. Now that Chu Xiu had recovered to his peak, it was naturally not a problem to use the soul-subduing Hades song to deal with He Zhan, a unity of heaven and man realm martial artist. He Zhan rubbed his head as he crawled up from the pile of broken chairs, his eyes filled with horror. Although he was a little rash and easily angered, he was still knowledgeable. This guy's mental strength secret technique was so powerful that he didn't even have the chance to react in a single exchange. However, He Zhan still hardened his tone and snorted coldly. "You only know how to use this kind of trick. Fight me head-on if you can." As he said that, He Zhan was unwilling to admit defeat and wanted to charge forward. However, at this moment, Lin Mingtong said in a deep voice, "Let me do it." When he was under Pang Hu, Lin Mingtong often quarreled with He Zhan. Between the two of them, one was impulsive while the other was rational. Usually, they wouldn't be on the same page. However, when facing outsiders, they were brothers who had gone through life and death together and were willing to entrust their backs to each other. A pitch-black spear that was as tall as 2 people was held in Lin Mingtong's hand. With an unparalleled aura and whistling strong wind, it smashed down at Chu Xiu. The powerful aura was simply unbelievable. It was unleashed by a seemingly skinny and weak martial artist like Lin Mingtong. This time, Chu Xiu didn't use the 9 forms of soul assimilation. He merely formed seals with both hands and displayed the great Vajra divine strength Dharma form. Stellar energy erupted around him, condensing into a strange figure. Half of it was illuminated with Buddhist light, while the other half was filled with demonic aura. The evil Buddha statue's palm descended, and the power of Buddha and demonic interweaved and erupted, directly blasting Lin Mingtong away. Mara Vajra form. Chu Xiu had already used the incarnation of the great Vajra mountain godly power during the Demon Dao meeting. Thus, he did not mind revealing this technique. Defeating 2 experts under Pang Hu in 2 moves, Chu Xiu's strength was completely revealed. If this had happened elsewhere, the surrounding people would definitely be shocked by Chu Xiu's strength and not dare to make a move. However, these bold bandits who had dared to challenge the Northern Yan dynasty in the past, although they were shocked by Chu Xiu's strength, they were also enraged and wanted to attack Chu Xiu. He Zhan and Lin Mutong were their brothers. Now that their brothers were beaten up, what should they do? Even if it was a martial Dao grandmaster in front of them, they only had one thing to do, and that was to attack. But right at this moment, Pang Hu snorted coldly and said, "All of you scram for me. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Looking at He Zhan, who was still standing there in a daze, and Lin Mingtong, who was lying on the ground, Pang Hu lightly snorted, "Are you dead? If you're not dead, then sit back down." Hearing Pang Hu's reprimand, He Zhan and Lin Mingtong finally sat back down obediently. However, He Zhan's chair had already been crushed by him. He Zhan looked around and finally stood beside Lin Mingtong with a downcast expression. Pang Hu stood up and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and laughed. "Young Master Lin is indeed a young talent of the Yinma clan. Your strength is indeed extraordinary. If Qilian village wants to survive this crisis, we will have to rely on you, young Master Lin." With Pang Hu's eyesight, although Chu Xiu had only made 2 moves, he could still see Chu Xiu's true strength. This was also because Chu Xiu had shown mercy. Otherwise, Lin Mingtong and He Zhan would have been seriously injured even if they did not die. Although Pang Hu had no intention of blaming Mei Qinglian, he still doubted whether this kid could be of any help to the Qilian stockade. However, now that he had seen Chu Xiu's strength, Pang Hu no longer had any doubts. Any sect that had such an outstanding disciple would definitely be nurtured as a treasure. His status was even higher than the martial arts masters in the sect. Mei Qinglian had sent the most outstanding young talent of the Yinma clan. She had given him enough face. Chu Xiu casually cupped his hands and said, "Leader Pang, you're too kind. The Saintess has asked me to help you solve the crisis. I will naturally do my best. However, I also need your village's cooperation. Otherwise, I will not be able to turn the situation around by myself." Pang Hu nodded and waved his hand. "Set up the banquet. Let's talk while we eat." Qilian Village's predecessor was the Northern 36 Bandits. To put it bluntly, the Northern 36 Bandits were bandits. No matter how strong they were, they could not avoid some bandit habits, just like now. A large table was placed in the main hall. More than 10 of Pang Hu's trusted subordinates were present. Eating large pieces of meat and drinking large bowls of wine may have become the Qilian Village's habit. However, this was the first time Chu Xiao saw such a scene. It was very novel. Qilian Village's way of eating large pieces of meat was no longer considered eating large pieces of meat. It was practically eating whole animals. Chicken and ducks were whole, but there was even a whole roasted mountain tiger. The rest of the delicacies such as bear paws and venison were innumerable. Pang Hu poured a bowl of wine for Chu Xiao and drank it in one gulp. He said in a deep voice, "Mr. Lin came all the way to Qilian Village to help. Everyone, stand up and show your appreciation." The Qilian Village bandits were best at drinking. One by one, they raised their bowls of wine. He Zhan and Lin Mingtong were even more eager. They were defeated by Chu Xiao in one move. Even now, they still felt a little embarrassed. If they can't beat you, they can at least drink, right? However, Chu Xiao only drank one round out of courtesy. He used his inner energy to suppress the alcohol. He put down the bowl and said, "Chief Pang, it's time to talk business." Hearing Chu Xiao's words, Pang Hu also put down his bowl. He Zhan and Lin Mingtong could only look at each other gloomily and put down their bowls as well. Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "Qilian Village's current crisis is not the situation, but the reason why Qilian Village is in such a crisis. First we have to find the source. Then we can do things." Pang Hu frowned and said, "Mr. Lin, what do you mean?" Although Pang Hu looked rough and uncouth, he wasn't stupid. In the past, the 36 bandits of the north were all annihilated. Only Pang Hu was left to struggle at death's door. This was not because he was a coward. It was because Pang Hu was more sensitive to danger. That was why he avoided the danger in time and preserved a trace of strength for the 36 bandits of the north. But this time, being forced into such a state by the loyalty-gathering manner, Pang Hu was really at a loss and could not figure out the situation. Chu Xiao paused and said, "Chief Pang is recuperating in the dense forest of Liaodong and regaining his strength. He also befriended the 13th prince, Xiang Chong, to relieve the pressure from the imperial court. This is a good move." Hearing Chu Xiao's words, Pang Hu's face showed a hint of pride. Pang Hu originally planned to recuperate and then continue with his old business. However, he met Xiang Chong by accident and befriended him. So, he used Xiang Chong to make the imperial court not pursue him, the surviving member of the 36 bandits of the north. The last time Pang Hu met Xiang Chong, it was after Xiang Chong came to Chu Xiao's aid with the Grand Master of the Yinma clan, Shang Tianyao, who was an official of the imperial family. So, it could be said that Xiang Chong and Pang Hu's meeting was indirectly facilitated by Chu Xiao. However, at this time, Chu Xiao suddenly said, "But Chief Pang, you're going the wrong way." Pang Hu frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiao said in a deep voice, "The land of Liaodong is not suitable for development in the first place. After Master Pang recovered your strength, you entrenched yourself around Liaodong County and set up a branch. Although you didn't plunder like the 36 bandits of the northern land in the past, and instead collected the tributes from passing merchants, it still caused some people to be dissatisfied." Pang Hu snorted coldly and said, "I've done enough benevolence. My Qilian village may be bandits, but we also abide by the rules. When they pass through Liaodong County, I only need to collect money and I'll guarantee their safety. If they can pay more money, I can even get my brothers to escort them all the way to their destination. Are they still dissatisfied?" In fact, Pang Hu learned this trick from Chu Xiao. After Han Bao returned to Qilian village, he naturally talked about how he lived all these years. Among them, his cooperation with Chu Xiao gave Pang Hu a lot of inspiration. Pang Hu was not a stupid person. After the 36 bandits of the north were annihilated, Pang Hu also reflected on why they were annihilated. In the end, Pang Hu came to a conclusion. The 36 bandits of the north were annihilated not because they robbed the imperial court and various martial arts forces, but because they did not abide by the rules, broke the rules, and offended everyone they could offend. That was why they were annihilated together. Therefore this time, Pang Hu used the method of cooperation between Chu Xiao and Han Bao in Shangmang Mountain to collect tolls. He did not go overboard. Moreover, Pang Hu also added a bodyguard service. As long as they could afford it, the bandits of Qilian village could even serve as escorts. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Chief Pang, you misunderstood me. The dissatisfaction I'm talking about is not the dissatisfaction of the passing merchants, but the dissatisfaction of the Morgue village. It's because you, Chief Pang, are blocking the Morgue village's way." "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu dipped his wine in wine and drew the rough terrain of the northern Yen on the table and said, "Under the development of Nierenlong, Long, the Morgue village is almost famous in the northern Yen Jianghu. Although it is not strong, it is very famous. Nierenlong Long is an expert in managing his reputation. Ordinary people seek profits first, then fame. But Nierenlong Long is good at using his reputation to win profits. Now that the Morgue village has accumulated enough fame, Nierenlong Long naturally wants to gain some practical benefits. But the Morgue village is known for being benevolent and righteous. How can they attack and destroy a family? Therefore, the simplest way is to create an alliance. The Morgue village will be the leader of the alliance to do something. If it succeeds, as long as Nierenlong Long's methods are right, the alliance will not disband and will still serve Nierenlong Long as the leader. Now, looking at the Morgue village's actions, it is obvious that their goal is to advance north. And Chief Pang's Qilian village has become the target of the Morgue village's alliance. They must get rid of the stepping stone. Chapter 5:14. Chu Xiu's words shocked and angered everyone present. Qilian Stockade Village used to be awe-inspiring in the past. When the 36 bandits of the northern land were still around, they dared to challenge the imperial court of the northern Yen kingdom. Who would have thought that they would be treated as a stepping stone by others now? He Zhan was so angry that he slammed the table and scolded, "Bastards! Those shameless people from the Morgue village said they wanted to exterminate the bandits and restore peace to Liaodong. It turns out that they wanted to expand their power and used Qilian village as an excuse." Chu Xiu said lightly, "There is no such thing as unconditional love and hatred in this world. The Morgue village has never been so benevolent. Otherwise it would not have developed to where it is now. The moon-worshipping cult is in the West Chu and the evil pole sect is in the northern land. If the Morgue village really wanted to help the people, why didn't they find trouble with the moon-worshipping cult? Wouldn't it be better to find the weaker evil pole sect? In other words, you are all from Qilian village and not the 36 bandits of the northern land. When the 36 bandits of the northern land were at their peak, would the Morgue village dare to find trouble with you?" Everyone present nodded, but Lin Mutong suddenly asked, "Mr. Lin, if the Morgue village wants to develop, why did they choose the northeast direction instead of other places?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "It's simple. Because the Morgue village can't afford to offend people from both sides. In the west, there is the Huangfu clan of Pingyao in western Yen. Although the Huangfu clan is not very strong, they have many trump cards as one of the oldest among the 9 aristocratic families. In the south is the Divine Martial School of southern Yen. Although the Divine Martial School is not strong, Yen Huainan is an outstanding person. The Morgue village doesn't want to offend Yen Huainan. Therefore, as long as the Morgue village has the intention to develop in these two sides, they will fight back. In the northeast direction, Liaodong County is vast but sparsely populated. It is close to East Yen and Qilian Stockade comes from the 36 bandits of the northern land. This in itself is a very good excuse. If I were Nierenlong Long, I would also choose this direction as my target." Pang Hu said in a low voice, "Then does young Master Lin have a way to break out of this situation? The Memorial Village has joined forces with more than 10 forces to attack together. In terms of numbers, our Qilian Stockade Village can't compare. Nierenlong Long is a slippery fellow. Although I have the strength to deal with him, he rarely fights face to face. The northern Yen martial artist, Han Boxian, is Nie Donglio's master. This time, they even invited Han Boxian. When I fought with him, both of us were injured. My injuries were probably more serious. Currently, our Qilian Stockade cannot compare to them in terms of high-end combat power and numbers." Hearing that even Han Boxian was involved, Chu Xiu could not help but ask, "Nie Donglu is also involved this time?" Lin Tong said, "Of course, and the one who planned to annihilate our Qilian Stockade village was Nie Donglu himself. Nierenlong Long, his father, spared no effort to build up Nie Donglio's reputation. Even the attack on Qilian village this time, most of the plans were arranged by Nie Donglu." A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. This time, he was not only here to help, he was also here to take revenge. Pang Hu's gaze towards Chu Xiu was still a little doubtful. When mentioning the memorial village, why did Lin Yi also look murderous? It seemed that this young talent recommended by Mei Qinglian was really reliable. He had already gotten into character so quickly and stood on the Qilian stockade side, treating the memorial village as an enemy. Chu Xiu thought for a while and said in a low voice, "If we want to break out of this situation, we need 3 steps. Retreat, divide, and take advantage of the situation. However, the world is unpredictable. Even the Taoist divination masters cannot take 1 step at a time and 3 at a time. I can only take 1 step at a time. If there is a problem in the middle, then I can fix it." Everyone present looked at each other. In fact, most of them did not know what Chu Xiu meant. For these guys who used to be bandits, they were usually good at 2 things: killing and robbing. It wasn't that the Northern 36 bandits were all idiots, but most of their personalities were just like that. They firmly believed that strength was more important than stratagems. Once their strength reached a certain level, they could ignore any stratagems. Although this was the truth, it was a pity that the 36 bandits of the north were not strong enough before they were annihilated. It was the same for the current Qilian village. Under the premise of insufficient strength, they could only rely on strategy to turn the tables. Pang Hu knocked on the table and said, "You said retreat, what do you mean?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "It means exactly what it means. Temporarily avoid the sharp edge and retreat first. This way, we can exchange for a chance of survival." As soon as Chu Xiu said this, everyone present suddenly exploded. He Zhan immediately stood up and said, "Absolutely not. The first master has worked with us for so many years and finally established a foothold in Liaodong County. In the end, you are telling us to give up these foundations and retreat directly. What is this? If admitting defeat could solve the problem, we would have admitted defeat to the morgue long ago. Why would we still invite you here?" Chu Xiu spread his hands and said in an indifferent tone, "Retreating is not admitting defeat. Also, Liaodong is not suitable for development in the first place. The land is vast and the population is sparse. Moreover, we are surrounded by enemies on all sides. The morgue in the east, the sect of divine powers in the west, the Huangfu family in the south, and the northern floating snow city in the north. Which of these forces has a good impression of the Qilian village? It's fine if no one makes a move now. Once someone makes a move like this, the Qilian village will not even have a place to run. Everyone, I am not from the Qilian village. The Saintess asked me to help. I am here. I have also come up with the idea. As for whether to use it or not, it is entirely up to you." Pang Hu frowned and thought for a moment. He directly slammed the table and said, "All right, we will do as Mr. Lin says. From now on, the Qilian village will listen to your command. Do not doubt the people you use." Pang Hu was not good at these things. It would be fine if someone was good at it. Of course, Pang Hu did not trust Chu Xiu, but Mei Qinglian. He believed that even if Mei Qinglian did not help him, she would not cheat him. That was why Mei Qinglian sent Chu Xiu at this time. It proved that Chu Xiu definitely had the ability to turn the situation around. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "If that's the case, then I would like to request Chief Pang to lead your brothers to break up and give up on Qilian village. Everyone will retreat to the extreme north, but do not enter the territory of the northern fluttering snow city. We must maintain an extremely low profile, only then can we proceed with the second and third step." Pang Hu nodded and waved his hand. After the banquet, all the martial artists who belonged to the Qilian village retreated. There were not many people in the entire Qilian village. There were only about 10,000 people. Among them were the elites of the Qilian Iron Cavalry. There were actually less than 1,000 of them. That was why it was extremely easy for them to retreat and hide. At this time, in a manor outside Liaodong County, Nie Renlong and Nie Donglu, as well as more than 10 martial artists in the Unity of Heaven and Men realm were all there. They were also holding a banquet, but it was much more exquisite than the banquet in the Qilian village. Nie Renlong sat in the middle of the main seat. Nie Donglu sat beside him. The people around him were the leaders of some of the martial arts forces in the east of Yen. At this time, they were constantly complimenting Nie Donglu. This time, it is all thanks to the young master's divine strategy. His plan was impeccable. Only then could we completely suppress the bandits and murderers. That's right. According to the young master's plan, we will advance step by step. I reckon it won't take long for us to completely devour the Chilean village. It is the fortune of the loyalty village to have such an outstanding person like the young master. It is also the fortune of the East of Yan's martial arts world. Recently, the young master has been accumulating his strength and did not make a name for himself in the martial arts world. That allowed Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian to enter the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. When this matter is over, the young master will definitely enter the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard. This group of people did not compliment Nie Renlong. Instead, they complimented Nie Donglu. It was not that they were insensible, but they knew that Nie Renlong had already planned to push Nie Donglu out since the loyalty village had caused such a huge commotion. As the manor master of the loyalty manor, Nie Renlong's personal strength aside, his reputation was big enough. Hence, Nie Renlong no longer needed some empty reputation. On the other hand, Nie Donglu was not even in the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard. Hence, Nie Renlong had to push him back to the top 10 again. Only then would Nie Donglu be qualified to compete with the young talents. Moreover, Nie Renlong had the intention of testing Nie Donglu in this operation. He only had one son. The future of the loyalty village would be handed over to Nie Donglu. Although Nie Donglu had the experience of joining forces to annihilate bandits and murderers in the past, those were only small fights. This time, the loyalty village had joined forces with more than 10 major forces in the east of Yan, as well as 2 martial Dao masters, Nie Renlong and Han Baxian. These people were all under Nie Donglio's command. This was a world of difference from before. However, it was worth praising that Nie Donglio's performance this time was really good. Although his performance was not amazing, he was cautious in his plan and fought steadily. He uprooted all the Chilean village's branches and finally forced them into the mountains and forests of Liaodong. The only mistake was the battle between Han Baxian and Crimson Face Heavenly King Pang Hu. Both of them were injured and Nie Renlong did not even have the chance to launch a sneak attack. In the past, Pang Hu was not the most famous among the 36 northern bandits. However, Hu knew that his strength was so strong that he could actually fight with Han Baxian until both of them were injured. However, it did not matter. Chilean village was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The loyalty village could completely destroy it if they attacked together. The reason why the loyalty village alliance had not made a move yet was because a forced battle would easily force the other party into a life and death struggle. Although according to Nie Donglio's calculations, the net would not break even if both sides were to die. At most, there would only be a few cracks. However, Nie Donglu was a cautious person. It was better to have as few losses as possible. Nibbling away step by step was the safest way. At this moment, someone from the loyalty village suddenly came to report that all the Chilean village members had retreated. This immediately stunned everyone present. Chapter 5:15. Although Quilian village had set Chilean village as their target, they had never underestimated Chilean village. Both Nie Donglu and Nie Renlong were like that. As the only survivor of the 36 bandits in the north, Chilean village's ability was not weak. That was why they had set up a banquet here to celebrate their temporary advantage. Who would have thought that the people of Chilean village would take the initiative to escape? Everyone present looked at each other. They were all prepared for the next few fierce battles, but who would have thought that they would win so easily this time? They were stunned for a moment. At this time, a middle-aged martial arts practitioner in a black brocade robe suddenly stood up and said with a smile, "Manor Master, young Manor Master, since Chilean village has escaped, does this mean that we can take over Liaodong County's territory?" Nie Donglu frowned slightly, feeling a little unhappy. These guys were really useless. They had just gotten a little bit of benefit and they were already prepared to share it. The reason why Quilian village could form this so-called alliance was because of its reputation. As for the other reason, it was because of benefits. Quilian village promised that as long as the territory was conquered, they would not take any of it. All of it would be given to these forces. Of course, the premise was that these forces would not leave the alliance. This was also Nie Renlong's cleverness. Quilian village would always be the one that opened the door for the people in the pugilistic world. Invading and conquering other territories was not done by Quilian village but by other forces in the alliance. If the bad reputation was carried by these forces, it would not harm Quillian Village's reputation. Moreover, once Quillian Village needed it, the alliance would immediately gather. This way they would have face. Why not? Hence, this warrior's request was not wrong. However, he seemed to be a little too eager. This made Nie Donglu feel a little unhappy. Nie Renlong smiled and said, "Don't worry, Miao family head. What belongs to you will definitely be yours. I'll send someone to investigate later. If those people from Qilian Stockade Village have really withdrawn from Liaodong County, we'll start to discuss how to distribute the territories." The Miao family head, Miao Chun Mao, belonged to a Miao family that did not have a strong foundation in the east of Yen. The reason why the Miao family was able to rise was because of Miao Chun Mao, an expert at the unity of the world realm. Therefore, Miao Chun Mao couldn't wait to divide the territory and strengthen the Miao family. Upon hearing Nie Renlong's words, Miao Chun Mao smiled and cupped his hands together. "Manor Lord, please don't blame me. I was a little too impatient." Nie Renlong waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter, it's just human nature." After sending the others away, Nie Donglu snorted coldly and said, "This group of people is really impatient. We haven't completely annihilated the Qilian stockade and they're already thinking of getting a share of the benefits." Nie Renlong said indifferently, "Everyone in the world values benefits. If there are no benefits, who would still work for you? Donglu, remember, the best people to make use of in this world are actually those who have desires in their hearts. Conversely, those who truly have no desires are the most difficult to deal with." Nie Donglu said in a deep voice, "Yes, I understand." However, Nie Donglu paused and said, "Father, what's going on with the Qilian stockade? Why did they suddenly retreat?" "I have investigated. Pang Hu is not someone who is afraid of death. I was even afraid that if he forced Qilian stockade village into a corner, the other party would fight to the death. Why did Pang Hu suddenly retreat? Could there be a trap in this?" Nie Renlong stroked his beard and thought for a moment before saying, "People's hearts can change. After experiencing the destruction of the 36 bandits of the northern lands, the current Pang Hu is no longer the Pang Hu of the Qilian iron cavalry of the past. Moreover, Pang Hu should have noticed the difference in strength between the two sides. Even if he doesn't think for himself, he has to think for the other Qilian stockade warriors. There's no benefit for him to fight the Loyalty Villa Alliance to the end. So it's normal for him to retreat now. However, even if there's a trap, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we've waited for so long. A few more days won't make a difference. Send someone to the Liaodong forest to investigate clearly, then we'll make our move." Nie Donglu nodded and said, "All right, I'll ask someone to do it now." When the people from the Righteous Manor investigated the Qilian stockade village in the dense forest of Liaodong, they found that it was indeed deserted. This made the martial arts forces in East Yen suddenly look wild with joy. The Loyalty Villa had already promised that they did not want all the territories in Liaodong County. All of them belonged to the other martial arts forces in the alliance. The leaders of these martial arts forces were not idiots. The Loyalty Villa was smart, but they were not stupid either. Naturally, they knew what the Loyalty Villa was thinking. However, it wasn't a bad thing for them to stay in the Loyalty Manor alliance. It was good to lean on a big tree. In the past, these forces were naturally not weak, but they could not be compared to the top martial arts forces like the Shenwu sect and the Huangfu clan. But now, if they stayed in the Loyalty Villa Alliance, they would have some confidence when they faced these top martial arts forces again. At this time, in a restaurant in a state capital of Liaodong County, Chu Xiao, He Zhan, Lin Mutong, Han Bao and more than 10 elite Qilian stockade warriors gathered together. Han Bao reported to Chu Xiao the information he had recently investigated. Pang Hu had already led most of the Qilian stockade warriors to hide in the north, avoiding the tracking of the Loyalty Villa. As for He Zhan and the other elite Qilian stockade warriors, they were ordered by Pang Hu to listen to Chu Xiao's orders. After Han Bao finished explaining the situation, He Zhan snorted coldly. "Now, as you wish, Qilian stockade has already given up our family's foundation. We are being chased like stray dogs. What do you think we should do now?" Chu Xiao did not care about He Zhan's tone. He only said faintly, "The higher we stand, the harder we fall. Let this group of people be happy for now. When the time comes, they will naturally cry." Since the concession was successful and the Loyalty Villa did not suspect anything, Then we should move on to the next step, which is division. Although a group like the Morgue Manor Alliance seems to be strong, any alliance is actually scattered. Everyone is united because of benefits or some kind of goal. But in the end, everyone is selfish. Their priority is still themselves. As he said this, Chu Xiao took out a stack of information and said, "This is the information of those forces that joined the Loyalty Villa Alliance. We don't need a lot of them. We only need to pick one to divide and make use of it." "That will do." Lin Mutong frowned and said, "Temptation or what?" Chu Xiao took a look at the forest passage and said, "Based on Qilian Stockade's current state, what can we use to tempt them? Even an idiot would know that at this time, they will definitely stand on the Loyalty Villa Alliance's side. Of course we have to threaten them. Among these forces, the one with the biggest loophole is the Miao family of Yendong. The Miao family itself is not strong and their foundation is very weak. It is only because of Miao Chun Mao, a great master in the oneness of heaven and men's state, that they rose. In the Loyalty Villa Alliance, most of the forces were personally invited by Nie Renlong. Only Miao Chun Mao joined on his own initiative. This person is so enthusiastic about this matter because he wants to occupy a foundation in Liaodong County, so that the Miao family can have more foundation to rise. This kind of person is the easiest to deal with. His family is his sore point. Seize his whole family and make use of them. If they are disobedient, let his whole family die. Simple and direct. Hearing Chu Xiao's words, everyone at the scene suddenly shivered. It was not because of Chu Xiao's words about killing the whole family, but because of Chu Xiao's tone when he said such words. The Qilian Stockade bandits were not good people, especially when they were the 36 bandits of the northern land. They had killed many people. However, they had only killed for the sake of plundering, unlike the current Chu Xiao. He had used an unusually calm tone to say such words, as if killing an entire family was as simple as eating and drinking. Seeing this, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. No wonder Lin Yi was the most outstanding disciple of the younger generation of the Devil Path. His heart was truly vicious and ruthless. At this time, they finally understood why the righteous sects clamored to eliminate the diabolism and defend the Tao. It was not because they had nothing better to do, but because this group of people from the diabolism was really King terrifying. However, at this time, Lin Mutong said with some hesitation, "Master Lin, what if that Miao Chun Mao does not care about his own family and snitches? If we do this, wouldn't it be a little against the rules of the Jianghu? After all, we shouldn't implicate family members." Chu Xiao glanced at Lin Mutong in surprise. This group of people from the 36 bandits of the northern land were actually so pedantic. They still cared about the rules of the Jianghu? Chu Xiao said lightly, "The saying that you shouldn't implicate family members is a joke. Your family enjoys the benefits that you snatch, but when someone seeks revenge, you say that you shouldn't implicate family members. Isn't that a joke? I am from the diabolism. You all know the reputation of the Inma clan, so I don't care about the rules. If you are worried about your reputation, then we can forget about this matter." Hearing this, Lin Mutong hurriedly said, "No problem, we will do as Master Lin said." Right now, the Great Master had said that everything must be done according to Master Lin's instructions. In the end, if there were any problems because of his suggestion, he would not be able to bear the responsibility. Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "In that case, everyone, follow me to the east of Yen first." Everyone present looked at each other and nodded. However, at this time, the way they looked at Chu Xiao was a little different. This group of people who used to be bandits were not good people to begin with. They were very vicious, so they did not take Chu Xiao seriously at the beginning. Even when He Zhan was defeated by Chu Xiao in one move, he was still a little unconvinced. However, when Chu Xiao revealed his plan just now, everyone realized that the vicious that they, as bandits, understood could not be compared to Lin Yi. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.